Welcome to part one of an exclusive four-part mini-series deep dive. And I have to say, we are taking on a pretty massive mission today.
Oh, massive is definitely the right word.
Yeah, to be honest, I've been kind of vibrating with energy just looking over the notes for this one. We are diving deep into the foundational concepts of Limitless by Jim Kwik. But, we really aren't just summarizing a book here.
No, definitely not. That would completely miss the point of the source material.
Right. The goal, the actual mission for this miniseries is to completely shatter the trance of limitation that, honestly, most of us walk around in every single day.
We're essentially handing you the literal operator's manual for your brain.
Yes. And I was thinking about this earlier. Think about your smartphone. What if you had the ability to learn anything faster, remember everything you read, and just instantly upgrade your brain hardware exactly the same way you upgrade your phone's operating system?
You just plug it in, hit update, and suddenly everything runs faster.
Exactly. It glitches less, you have entirely new capabilities. That is the exact biological reality we're unlocking for you right now.
It really is the ultimate technological upgrade. But the beautiful thing is, the hardware doesn't come from a store. It's already sitting right there between your ears.
Waiting for the update.
Waiting for the update. And to match the velocity of this deep dive, because we want this to be a fast-paced dopaminergic sprint, I want you to visualize our digital backdrop today.
Oh, I love this visual.
Yeah, so we aren't sitting in front of a static, dusty library of books. Imagine a pulsing, neon-lit, three-dimensional topographical map of a neural network.
Like a massive sparking factory assembly line.
Exactly. Firing with electricity, constantly rewiring and reshaping itself in real time. Synapses are connecting, they're glowing bright, building entirely new pathways.
Which is exactly what your brain is doing right at this exact second as it processes the sound of our voices.
That dynamic electric clay is happening in your head right now.
It's such a wild mental image, a sparking biological assembly line. But just so we don't get lost in all that electricity, let's clearly set our parameters for today.
Good idea.
To build an indestructible foundation, this specific deep dive is hyper-focused. We are restricting our view entirely to the beginning of the work.
Right, from the foreword, straight through the introduction, and locking in at the end of Chapter 4.
Chapter 4, which is called How to Read and Remember This Book. And the rationale here is simple, right? We have to pour the concrete before we build the skyscraper.
If we don't master the setup, none of the advanced speed reading or memory techniques we cover in the later parts of this mini-series are going to stick.
They'll just slide right off.
Exactly. Knowledge without the proper structural foundation is just trivia that you eventually forget. I mean, we've all read a brilliant nonfiction book, felt incredibly inspired.
Oh, 100%.
And then a week later, we can barely remember a single actionable takeaway.
It's the worst feeling.
We are going to fix that today. But to understand the mechanics of this framework, we really have to understand the deeply personal context behind it.
Because this wasn't born in some sterile cognitive science laboratory.
No, not at all. It was forged in profound personal struggle. To grasp the mechanics of unlimiting your brain, we need to look at Jim Kwik's origin story.
The boy with the broken brain.
Yeah.
I have to say, reading through his childhood experiences in the source text was tough. It is such a visceral, painful starting point.
It really is.
When he was just a kid in kindergarten, he suffered a severe head injury. And the fallout wasn't just physical. The cognitive and emotional damage was immense.
He couldn't focus.
His memory was completely shot. It took him years longer than his peers just to learn how to read. But the absolute darkest moment, the part that genuinely punches you in the gut, was an incident with a teacher.
A teacher who was frustrated with his lack of progress.
Right. And she points at him in front of other people and actually says, "There's the boy with the broken brain."
You really have to pause and consider the weight of that moment for a child. In psychology and neuroscience, we look very closely at how external labels become internalized belief systems.
Especially at that age.
Exactly. A young brain is incredibly plastic and highly impressionable. When an authority figure stamps a label on you like that, your brain doesn't just record it as a passing comment.
It adopts it as an absolute truth.
Yes. For him, that incredibly cruel phrase became a hypnotic mantra. I'm so stupid. I'm too dumb to learn. I don't understand.
Just running on loop.
Daily scripts running on loop in his head.
It is terrifying how easily we accept those limitations. I mean, we all have our own version of that, right?
Absolutely.
Maybe we didn't have a severe head injury, but someone told us we were bad at math or not a creative person.
And we just adopted it as biological fact.
Yeah, we just say, well, that's who I am. For Jim, he literally viewed himself as fundamentally damaged. He thought his intellectual capacity was a fixed, immovable object,
He was locked in a mental prison.
a prison he stayed in for years.
He did. And the tragedy there is that when you believe your capacity is fixed, you stop looking for ways to expand it. You just try to survive within the confines of your cell.
Which brings us to his college years. He is still operating under this broken brain paradigm,
On the verge of dropping out,
completely malnourished, surviving on barely any sleep, working himself to the absolute bone just to keep his head above water.
and the physical toll peaks when he passes out in the library, falls down a flight of stairs, and suffers yet another head injury.
Which is just a brutal irony. He wakes up in a hospital bed, absolutely emaciated, weighing something like 117 pounds. He is hit rock bottom.
But rock bottom is where the paradigm shift happens.
Right, because during this recovery, a nurse hands him a mug of tea. And on that mug is a quote from Albert Einstein.
The same level of thinking that has created your problem won't solve your problem.
That quote is the catalyst. It forces a complete mental reboot. He realizes he's been asking the wrong question his entire life.
Up until that point in the hospital bed, his guiding question was, why am I so stupid?
And when you ask your brain a question like that,
It will search its database to give you evidence of your stupidity. It will find every mistake you've ever made to validate the question.
but the Einstein quote makes him realize he needs to upgrade his question.
He needs to ask, how does my brain actually work? How can I learn how to learn?
And because he changes the question, his brain starts looking for different answers, which leads to this pivotal encounter with a friend's father.
Who essentially steps into the role of a mentor.
Yeah, and this scene in the notes, it reads like something out of a movie. The mentor takes Jim to his home and walks him into a room he's never seen before.
Filled wall to wall, floor to ceiling with books.
Now, to someone who loves to read, that sounds like a dream. But for Jim, at that specific time in his life, reading was pure, unadulterated agony.
He describes the feeling as being like walking into a room full of snakes.
A room full of snakes. He was physically terrified of the books.
Because every single book represented his inadequacy. Every book was a loud reminder of the broken brain label.
But the mentor starts pulling these snakes off the shelves anyway. Biographies of brilliant historical figures, deep philosophical texts, personal growth books.
He hands this massive stack to Jim and casually tells him to read one a week.
Which is an insane request for a kid who struggles to read a single paragraph.
Of course, Jim immediately rejects it.
He pushes back hard. He says he can't possibly do that, not with his college course load, and certainly not with his broken brain.
But here's the turning point. The mentor asks Jim to show him his goals, the list of dreams Jim had previously been asked to write down.
The mentor reads the list, looks at Jim, and then he does something incredibly profound.
He takes his 2 index fingers and places them on the sides of Jim's head, right on his temples.
And he says, "The space between my fingers is your brain. That's the key. You are this close to everything you want."
The spatial awareness of that physical gesture is brilliant. It completely shatters the illusion of distance.
What do you mean by the illusion of distance?
Well, when we have big dreams, they feel impossibly far away. We think the obstacle is the economy or our lack of resources or some external force in the world.
Right, the excuse is always outside of us.
Exactly. That gesture centralized the issue. The obstacle wasn't the world. The obstacle and the solution was the biological wetware sitting right between his ears.
It's like watching a giant, heavy combination log finally click open.
Click.
That breakthrough is the genesis of the entire framework we were discussing today, the Limitless model.
The 3 M's.
Yes. Now, I want to unpack this because at first glance, the Limitless model seems almost too simple. It's based on 3 intersecting domains: mindset, motivation, and methods.
But we need to look closer at those definitions.
Let's play devil's advocate here for a second. Mindset is such a massive buzzword in the self-help space. It gets thrown around so much that it almost loses its meaning.
It becomes synonymous with just thinking happy thoughts.
Right. So how does this framework elevate mindset beyond just positive thinking?
That's a crucial distinction to make. Positive thinking is just hoping things turn out well. Mindset in this biological and cognitive framework is the what.
A what?
It is your fundamental operating system. It consists of the deeply held beliefs, the attitudes, and the assumptions you hold about who you are, what you deserve, and what is biologically possible for you.
So it's the base code.
Yes. Neurologically speaking, a limiting belief is just a heavily trafficked neural pathway. If you repeatedly tell yourself, I am terrible at remembering names, your brain optimizes for that reality.
It literally builds the infrastructure to be bad at names.
Exactly. You stop paying attention when people introduce themselves because your operating system has already decided you won't remember.
So if your mindset is set to, I have a broken brain, no amount of studying or positive wishing will fix it.
Because your foundational code is instructing your brain to fail.
Okay, that makes total sense. It's not just think happy thoughts. It's about rewriting the base code so your brain actually allows the new information to process.
That's the first M, mindset.
Which brings us to the second M, motivation. This is the why. And again, I feel like people misunderstand motivation.
We think it's this fleeting feeling we get after watching a hype video on the internet.
Right, that momentary spike of adrenaline. But the no's frame it differently. It frames it as the actual biological energy required to take action.
People often label themselves as lazy or procrastinators, but usually they aren't inherently lazy.
They just lack a compelling why.
Or they literally lack the physiological energy to execute the task. In the Limitless model, motivation isn't a fixed personality trait that you are either blessed with or you aren't.
It's not magic.
It's a formula. It's a process you actively generate.
Purpose, multiplied by energy, multiplied by small, simple steps.
Yes. If you hate your job, your brain won't give you the dopamine or the energy to learn a new skill for it. You have to manufacture the motivation by connecting the learning to a deeply personal purpose.
Purpose times energy times small, simple steps. I love that equation.
Huh.
So we have the what, which is mindset. We have the why, which is motivation.
And the third M brings it all together. Methods.
And how?
These are the specific step-by-step procedures for learning how to learn. This is meta-learning.
Because here is the brutal truth that we all kind of know but ignore. We were taught completely antiquated 19th century methods in school.
Rote memorization, passive listening, standardized testing.
It is the equivalent of trying to run a modern, complex software application on a 1990s dial-up modem.
The hardware and the environment have evolved, but the methods we use to process information haven't changed in over a century.
So when you intersect an unlimited mindset, highly generated motivation, and upgraded 21st century methods,
You achieve a limitless state.
the profound realization here is that human beings constantly shrink their dreams to fit their current reality.
We look at our perceived limits, our bank account, our current skill level, our tiredness, and say, well, I guess I'd have to settle for less.
But the limitless model demands the exact opposite. It demands that you expand your mindset, motivation, and methods to make your reality fit your grandest dreams.
Expand the 3 M's.
Expand your 3 M's. Yes, but, and this is a big but, as inspiring as that is, we have to acknowledge the battlefield we are walking onto.
The modern world.
Right. Before we can even begin to expand our limits, we have to survive the environment we're currently in. Why is upgrading your brain not just a fun self-improvement hobby, but an absolute life-or-death necessity for you listening right now?
Dr. Mark Hyman wrote the foreword to this book, and he paints a deeply unsettling picture.
He really does. Our brains are fundamentally under siege.
As soon as you step out your front door.
Or honestly, as soon as you roll over in bed and grab your phone.
Exactly. You are fighting a daily war against 4 glowing digital supervillains.
It really is a biological mismatch.
You have to ask, what happens to a biological organism when you force it into an environment it did not evolve to inhabit?
Our brains are ancient, magnificent survival machines.
They evolved over millennia to track weather patterns, remember where food sources were, read the facial expressions of a small tribe.
They did not evolve to be subjected to a barrage of infinite push notifications.
Endless doom-scrolling feeds.
Hyper-stimulating screens. The text identifies 4 specific digital supervillains that are actively, measurably degrading our cognitive capacity right now.
Let's face the first villain.
Villain number 1, digital deluge. The sheer, unadulterated flood of information.
We are drowning in data.
And I know information overload sounds like a cliche, but the numbers here are staggering. Can you break down the actual processing gap?
The statistics highlight exactly why we feel so exhausted. The human nervous system gathers up to 11 million bits of information per second from our environment through our senses.
11 million.
Per second.
Your peripheral vision, the temperature of the room, the hum of the refrigerator, 11 million bits per second are hitting your sensors.
But what about our conscious processing?
The conscious mind typically only processes about 50 bits per second.
50 out of 11 million.
So you have a funnel with 11 million bits pouring into the top and a tiny drip of 50 bits coming out the bottom.
Now add the internet to that. Right. We are living in a world of infinite information, but finite time and finite attention.
It's like trying to drink from a fire hose that never, ever turns off. You just get blasted in the face.
No wonder everyone walks around feeling a baseline level of anxiety and overwhelm,
The brain physically cannot filter the flood fast enough,
which leads to chronic stress and literal sleeplessness.
which naturally brings us to villain number 2. And this one is insidious because we all think we're immune to it. Digital distraction.
Ah, yes. The myth of multitasking.
Exactly. We all put excellent multitasker on our resumes thinking we are these brilliant jugglers.
We are not.
Let's look at the actual neuroscience here because this blew my mind. Daniel J. Levitin, a prominent neuroscientist, is quoted explaining what happens underneath the skull when we shift our attention.
He notes that asking the brain to shift attention from one activity to another causes the prefrontal cortex and the striatum to literally burn up oxygenated glucose.
Now pause for a second. The prefrontal cortex. I know that's the advanced decision-making part of the brain right behind my forehead.
Right.
What exactly is the striatum doing in this context? And why specifically oxygenated glucose?
It's a great question. Let's translate the biology. The prefrontal cortex is your CEO. It directs focus and makes complex decisions.
Okay.
The striatum is a deeper brain structure heavily involved in action planning, reward processing, and motivation.
So they work together.
Exactly. When you are focused on writing a report, both are engaged in that single goal. But when your phone buzzes and you glance at a text message, you force the CEO and the action planner to abruptly halt the writing report protocol.
Load up the evaluate text message protocol.
Process it, shut it down, and then attempt to reload the writing report protocol.
Just to read a 5-word text.
Exactly. And every single time you execute that shift, it requires energy. Oxygenated glucose is essentially the premium gasoline your brain runs on.
The high-octane stuff.
Your brain is an energy hog. It takes up about 20% of your body's energy despite being a tiny fraction of its weight. When you engage in rapid, continual shifting, checking a text, writing an email, looking at a social feed, toggling back to the email, you are forcing the brain to burn through its limited daily tank of oxygenated glucose so rapidly that you hit a state of neurochemical depletion.
That is why you can sit at a desk for 3 hours, do no physical labor whatsoever, but feel profoundly cognitively exhausted.
Okay, here's a visceral analogy for that.
Let's hear it.
Imagine you are driving a high-performance sports car. Smooth, single-task focus is like cruising in fifth gear on a clear highway.
It's highly efficient.
Right. Multitasking isn't driving faster. Multitasking is redlining the engine in first gear, slamming on the brakes, throwing it into reverse, slamming the brakes again, and redlining it in first gear again.
You are absolutely destroying the engine.
Generating massive amounts of heat and friction.
And burning through all your expensive fuel just to go nowhere.
That is precisely what is happening inside your skull. You are creating massive compromises in your cognitive performance.
And that daily depletion sets the perfect stage for villain number 3, digital dementia.
Digital dementia. Even just hearing that phrase makes me uncomfortable.
It should. It refers to the dangerous modern habit of outsourcing our memory to our smart devices.
We rely on our phones to remember phone numbers, addresses, daily schedules.
Basic historical facts. We treat our brains like hard drives that are running out of storage space, thinking we need to offload the data to the cloud.
But your brain is not a hard drive that fills up. Neurologically, it operates much more like a muscle.
Use it or lose it. I was thinking about this yesterday. If I lost my phone right now and I had to borrow a stranger's phone to call my partner in an emergency, I honestly don't know if I could dial their number from memory.
And you talk to them every single day.
Every single day, I've completely outsourced that data to a contact list.
You are definitely not alone in that. And the biological principle is undeniable. Think of it like a physical building. If you live or work in a multi-story building and you only ever take the elevator, day after day, year after year, the muscles in your legs will adapt to that lack of exertion.
They will physically atrophy.
You will become weaker. The same exact biological principle applies to your hippocampus and your memory networks.
When you constantly outsource your memory to a search engine or your contacts app, you are taking the digital elevator.
Your mental muscles, your organic memory capacities, are actively atrophying from lack of use.
You are losing the ability to hold and recall information because you never demand that your brain actually do the work.
Wow. We are willingly carrying around these tiny, glowing crutches in our pockets, and our mental muscles are just wasting away.
And it somehow gets even worse with villain number 4, Digital deduction.
We've outsourced our memory, and now we are outsourcing our critical thinking.
Algorithms are getting so incredibly good at predicting what we want to see and hear. They are now doing the reasoning for us.
The subtlety of digital deduction is what makes it so dangerous. Because we have immediate access to infinite opinions, hot takes, and instantaneous answers, we are losing our cognitive endurance.
Cognitive endurance, meaning the stamina to think deeply.
Exactly. Deep critical thinking, the ability to look at conflicting pieces of information, synthesize them, and deduce your own original conclusion requires sustained mental effort.
It's hard work.
It is. But if a screen immediately hands you a pre-packaged opinion that aligns perfectly with your existing biases, you take the shortcut.
Over time, we let the screen tell us what to think.
We are actively surrendering the very cognitive trait that makes us human, our ability to reason.
It's like we are slowly devolving into passive consumers of reality rather than active participants.
It is a dark path if left unchecked.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? It means you have to fight back against these villains, and your ultimate weapon is the wetware you already possess.
Let's go inside your limitless brain.
Yes. To really shatter these limitations, we need to understand the physical, biological marvel we are working with.
When you actually break down the physical specifications of the human brain, it genuinely defies comprehension.
We are talking about roughly 3 pounds of fatty, watery tissue.
To the naked eye, it doesn't look like much. Yet, it acts as the most sophisticated supercomputer in the known universe.
Inside that 3-pound mass, there are roughly 86 billion neurons,
Individual brain cells.
firing in a magnificent synchronized biological symphony.
86 billion neurons.
I want to stop and contextualize that number, because human brains aren't great at understanding billions.
It's too abstract.
Right. If each of those 86 billion neurons were a single second in time, that would equal over 2,700 years of seconds.
You've done 1,100 years.
That is the sheer volume of processing units packed into your skull, and they are generating up to 70,000 thoughts a single day.
And they communicate across a massive web of synaptic connections that is denser than the stars in the Milky Way galaxy.
It's unbelievable.
But here is the most important part of this entire discussion. For the longest time, the scientific community sold the public a massive, limiting lie.
We used to believe that your brain's physical development peaked in late adolescence.
The old dogma was that once you reached your early 20s, your brain was essentially set in concrete.
You had the brain cells you had, and from there, it was just a slow, depressing deterioration as cells died off as you aged.
The ultimate broken brain mindset endorsed by science.
It's such a bleak way to view human potential. But the notes forcefully debunk this. Modern neuroscience has proven that old model entirely false.
Thankfully, yes. The defining reality of the human brain is neuroplasticity.
Neuroplasticity.
Your brain is not concrete. It is moldable clay. It is a living, breathing, dynamic organ that possesses the lifelong capacity to continually rewire, reshape, and physically change its structure based on your actions and the environments you expose it to.
The analogy they use in the text is that the brain is like a snowflake.
No two brains in the universe are exactly alike.
Even identical twins have different brains. They're like snowflakes because they constantly adapt and morph based on the specific demands placed upon them by their owner.
If you are raised in an affluent, highly stimulating environment, your brain wires itself one way to optimize for that.
But if you are raised in poverty or under constant stress and threat, your brain wires itself to survive that specific environment.
Heightening the amygdala and stress responses.
Which brings us to an incredibly empowering realization. Your brain is always listening to what you tell it to do.
If you demand that it learns a new language at age 50, it will physically forge new neural pathways to accommodate that demand.
But if you demand nothing of it and spend 6 hours a day passively staring at a screen,
it will prune those complex pathways to conserve energy.
Your learning capacity and therefore your life is not fixed. Plasticity is the ultimate biological proof that you can become limitless.
You are the architect of your own neurology.
The architect of your own neurology. That is a massive paradigm shift. And it gets even deeper, because it isn't just the brain in your skull we need to talk about. The source notes highlight something called the enteric nervous system.
Your second brain.
Yes, the mind-gut connection. The more we learn about the enteric nervous system, the more fascinating it becomes.
There are millions of neurons lining your gut, and they are in constant two-way communication with your brain via the vagus nerve.
It is staggering to realize what your body is doing unconsciously right at this very second. Think about it.
Yeah.
Right now, as you listen to this, your gut might be digesting a sandwich you ate earlier, extracting complex nutrients, and deciding how to send that physical fuel up to your brain.
Simultaneously, your brainstem is regulating your breathing and heart rate.
Another part of your brain is monitoring your peripheral environment for safety, taking in the tactile sensation of the chair you are sitting on, processing the ambient smells in the room,
And on top of all that, your auditory cortex is taking the sound waves of our voices,
converting them into language.
extracting the meaning, and attempting to encode this information about neuroplasticity into your long-term memory.
All concurrently.
It is a miraculous concurrent processing system. And the beauty of the Limitless model is that to upgrade this massive system, you don't need to change every single microprocess in your life.
You don't need to work 100 hours a week.
You just need to find the leverage points.
Jim tells this phenomenal story about a mechanic that perfectly illustrates this leverage. There's a company with a massive, multi-million-dollar machine that acts as the lifeblood of their factory.
Right.
One day, it completely breaks down. The local engineers try everything, but nobody can fix it. Production halts. They're losing money by the minute.
Desperation sets in.
Finally, they call in this elite veteran mechanic. He walks in, studies the massive machine for a few minutes, pulls out a tiny wrench, and turns one specific screw.
Instantly, the machine roars back to life.
And the executives are thrilled until he sends them the bill for $10,000.
They are outraged.
They say, "You were here for 10 minutes and you turned one single screw. We want an itemized bill."
So the veteran mechanic calmly sends them a revised bill.
It says, "Turning screw, $1. Knowing which screw to turn, $9,999.
Exactly. Elite mental performers. The people who seem to learn effortlessly and achieve massively don't do everything.
They don't have superhuman stamina to study 2047.
They just know exactly which screws to turn inside their own cognitive machinery.
They find these specific behaviors, the specific meta-learning tools that yield the absolute maximal output for the absolute minimum effort.
And that, my friends, brings us to the ultimate set of screws.
We are opening up the operator's manual. We are diving deep into Chapter 4, How to Read and Remember.
We are moving from the theory of the brain to the actual execution of limitless learning.
If we're going to learn how to learn, we had to immediately address the greatest enemy of human memory, the forgetting curve.
First mapped out by Hermann Ebbinghaus, this mathematical formula describes the terrifying rate at which our brains naturally discard information.
The research suggests that human beings forget approximately 50% of what they learn within a single hour of learning it.
And it gets worse. Within 24 hours, an average of 70% of that newly acquired information is completely gone.
70%. It's like pouring premium, high-octane mental fuel into a bucket that is completely riddled with holes.
You spend 3 hours reading a dense nonfiction book or sitting in a highly technical meeting at work.
And by the time you wake up tomorrow morning, 70% of it has just vanished into the ether. You've wasted your time and your oxygenated glucose.
We have to plug the holes in the bucket.
And the first plug is understanding the natural rhythm of our attention span. Human attention naturally wanes after about 10 to 40 minutes of sustained focus.
This is where Francesco Cirillo's Pomodoro technique becomes an essential cognitive tool.
It is based on the idea of working in focused 25-minute chunks, followed by a mandatory 5-minute break.
Now, many people hear that and think, a 5-minute break, that sounds unproductive.
But why is this rhythm so crucial? It has entirely to do with the psychological concepts of primacy and recency.
Okay, let's unpack those terms. Primacy means that you naturally remember the things that occur at the beginning of a learning session or an event.
Recency means you naturally remember the things that happen at the end.
But wait, let me push back here. If I'm really dialed into a book and I hit that 25-minute mark, stopping for 5 minutes feels like I'm breaking my flow state. Why would I intentionally interrupt myself?
It's a valid concern, but the math of memory counters it. If you sit down and force yourself to read for 2 straight hours without a break, leveraging primacy and recency, you will likely remember the first 20 minutes really well and the last 10 minutes really well.
That leaves an entire hour and a half in the middle that becomes a massive, blurry, dead space for learning.
By breaking your 2 hours into 25-minute Pomodoros with short breaks, you're artificially creating multiple beginnings and multiple ends.
You drastically increase your attention because you are systematically eliminating the dead space in the middle of your learning curve.
You are literally hacking your own attention span to create more peaks of retention.
You sacrifice a little bit of momentum to guarantee massive gains in memory.
I love it. Now, we've plugged the first hole in the bucket. It is time for the crown jewel of this deep dive, the ultimate dopaminergic sprint. We're going to break down the FASTER method.
This is the core protocol for rapidly learning and retaining anything, FASTER.
We are going to give each of these the time they deserve. I'll kick us off with the F,
Let's do it. F stands for forget.
which immediately sounds contradictory. Didn't we just spend 10 minutes talking about not forgetting things?
But this is different. To learn with laser focus, the notes dictate that you have to temporarily erase 3 specific things from your mind.
First, forget what you already know about the subject. Now, I have to admit, this is tough for me. Isn't prior knowledge how we build mental models? How do you balance being a blank slate with actually using your existing expertise?
It's a delicate balance. Prior knowledge is vital, but when you are encountering new material, your existing knowledge can act as a filter that rejects anything novel.
If you think you already know everything about sales and you read a new book on sales, your brain will only look for concepts that validate your existing beliefs.
You will ignore the revolutionary ideas. You have to temporarily adopt a beginner's mind. As the Zen proverb goes, if your cup is already full, you can't pour anything new into it.
You have to empty the cup to learn.
That makes sense. Let down your ego so the new data can get in.
The second thing you have to forget is what is not urgent: situational distractions.
If you are trying to study, but a background process in your brain is worrying about picking up the dry cleaning or replying to an email, you are splitting your cognitive resources.
The fix here is simple. Write the distraction down on a physical pad of paper to get it out of your mental RAM and actively forget it for the next 25 minutes.
And third, and most importantly, forget your limitations.
Forget the broken brain lies. Forget that you aren't good at remembering faces. Suspend your disbelief in your own potential.
Excellent. Which brings us to the A. The A stands for ACT.
Traditional 19th century education trained us to believe that learning is a passive experience.
You sit in a hard chair, remain quiet, and consume a lecture from an authority figure.
But neurobiology tells a different story. Learning is absolutely not a spectator sport. The human brain does not learn effectively by passive consumption. It learns through active creation.
So reading a book while lying on the couch isn't really learning.
Not optimally. If you want to master a concept, you must act on it. You have to take notes, highlight, ask yourself questions, draw diagrams, and physically engage with the material.
Action signals to the brain that this information is vital for survival, moving it from short-term memory to long-term storage.
We have to get our hands dirty with the information. Moving to SS is for state.
All learning is state-dependent. Your state is the current snapshot of your emotions, driven by your internalized psychology and your physical body language.
Here is a massive equation from the text that everyone needs to remember. Information times emotion equals long-term memory.
If you tie a strong feeling to a piece of information, it becomes unforgettable. You remember exactly where you were and what you felt during major historical tragedies or personal triumphs.
But if we apply this to traditional learning, what is the dominant emotion most people felt sitting in a high school classroom?
Boredom. Absolute apathy.
Exactly. Boredom is a 0 on the emotional scale. So if we run the equation, information times 0 equals 0.
That is precisely why you forgot the periodic table the minute the test was over. You didn't care.
To learn limitlessly, you have to actively manage and manipulate your state. You cannot wait to feel inspired.
You have to manufacture curiosity, enthusiasm, and high physical energy before you sit down to learn. Sit up straight, breathe deeply, and overcome the boredom.
Which flows perfectly into the T. T stands for teach.
This is closely related to the famous Feynman technique. When you approach a new topic, a new book, or a new project at work, do not learn it just for your own personal consumption.
Learn it with the explicit intention of explaining that exact concept to someone else later that day.
How does that shift the neurology?
It dramatically shifts your cognitive engagement. When you are just reading for yourself, you can glaze over difficult paragraphs and think, yeah, I get the gist of it.
But when you know you have to stand in front of a colleague or your spouse and explain how a concept works, your brain forces a much higher level of synthesis.
You pay closer attention, you structure the information more logically in your mind, you look for analogies, and as a result, you retain it significantly better.
You learn it twice, once when you study it and once when you synthesize it to teach.
FAST. Forget, act, state, teach. The E stands for enter.
This one is deceptively simple but profoundly disruptive to how most of us live. What is the most powerful personal performance tool you own?
E isn't a complex software suite. It's your calendar.
As human beings, we are great at entering obligations into our calendar. We enter work meetings, dentist appointments, and dinner reservations.
But we rarely, if ever, enter our own personal growth.
We treat personal development as a luxury that we will get to when we have free time. But the reality of the modern distracted world is that free time does not exist.
You will always be swallowed by the digital deluge.
Exactly. If it is not on your calendar, it simply doesn't exist. You have to enter your learning time, your 25-minute Pomodoro sessions, into your schedule as a hard, non-negotiable appointment with yourself.
Treat a block of reading time with the exact same reverence you would treat a meeting with your boss.
And finally, the R in FASTER, R stands for review.
This ties directly back to plugging the holes in the forgetting curve.
Because we know that 70% of information disappears in 24 hours, you must actively recall what you just learned utilizing spaced repetition.
Before you start a new reading session or a new learning module, take just 2 to 5 minutes to actively review the main concepts you learned in the previous session.
Not just rereading, right? Active recall.
Crucial distinction. Don't just scan the highlighted text. Close the book and try to remember the concepts from scratch.
That mental strain of pulling the information back up from your memory networks strengthens the neural pathways.
By reviewing it, you are signaling to your brain, hey, we are accessing this file again. It must be important.
Your brain will then assign greater value to that reviewed material and firmly flag it for long-term storage.
So there's the ultimate sprint. FASTER. Forget, act, state, teach, enter, review.
If you apply that protocol to anything, a deep dive, a dense nonfiction book, learning a new software at work, your retention will skyrocket.
You will be operating on a different plane than the people around you. But there is one final critical screw to turn before we wrap up.
And it goes back to how we bypass that terrifying reality of 11 million bits of information overwhelming us every second.
We have to talk about the immense power of questions.
This is where we bring everything together. As we established, the brain is fundamentally a deletion device. It has to be.
If you consciously processed 11 million bits of sensory data a second, you would go insane from sensory overload within moments.
The biological mechanism that acts as the bouncer for your conscious mind, the filter that decides what gets deleted and what gets through, is called the reticular activating system, or the RAS.
Okay, let's simplify the RAS.
Yeah.
How does this filter actually make its decisions?
The way you program your RAS is entirely through the questions you ask yourself. Your deeply held questions dictate your focus.
If you decide you want to buy a red sports car, suddenly you see red sports cars everywhere on the highway.
They were always there, but your RAS was deleting them because they weren't relevant.
By asking, where are the red sports cars? You program the filter to let that specific data through.
Questions act like a brilliant, concentrated spotlight cutting through a pitch-black room. If you read a page of a book without asking questions, your brain considers the information irrelevant and deletes it.
But if you prep your mind with the right questions beforehand, the answers will practically jump off the page at you. The text will illuminate itself.
Questions are the answer. If you ask a terrible question like, why am I so dumb? Your RAS will spotlight every mistake you've ever made.
But the notes provide the 3 dominant magic questions that you must constantly ask yourself whenever you're trying to learn something new. Listen to these, write them down, and burn them into your mind.
Question 1. How can I use this?
Question 2. Why must I use this?
Question 3. When will I use this?
Let's look at the psychology beneath those 3 specific questions. They aren't random.
How can I use this? Forces your brain to immediately look for practical, real-world application. It takes abstract theory and forces your brain to build a bridge to your concrete reality.
Why must I use this? Taps directly into the motivation sphere of the limitless model we discussed earlier. It attaches an emotional imperative, a life or death why, to the data. And we know from the state principle that emotion enhances memory.
And finally, when will I use this? Demands that you schedule the knowledge. It forces you to take out your calendar and enter the application of this knowledge into your timeline.
It perfectly synthesizes every single concept we've talked about today. It ties the 3 M's, the FASTER method, and neuroplasticity all together with 3 simple questions.
Okay, let's pull back and synthesize this dopaminergic sprint. We have covered an unbelievable amount of ground today.
We started by looking at the horrific mental prison of the broken brain, and realize that our limits are often just external labels we've mistakenly accepted as our internal operating system.
We identified the modern siege, the four digital supervillains of deluge, distraction, dementia, and deduction that are actively trying to degrade our cognitive machinery.
We then explored the incredible, empowering biological reality of neuroplasticity. The realization that your 86 billion neurons are not fixed in concrete, but are highly reactive, moldable clay waiting for your instructions.
We debunked the outdated myth that your brain peaks in adolescence and proved that through focused effort, you can physically rewire your hardware at any age.
And we locked in the tools to execute that rewiring. We learned how to plug the holes in the forgetting curve with Pomodoros, we hacked our attention span with the concepts of primacy and recency, and we unleashed the faster method to guarantee rapid learning.
We are now shining the brilliant spotlight of our RAS using those three magic questions.
I want to say this directly to you listening right now.
Mm-hmm.
The limitless you isn't a fantasy. It already exists inside you. The neural hardware is there. The limitless software is ready to be installed. It is just waiting for you to unlock it.
And as we wrap up this foundational deep dive, I want to leave you with a lingering, mind-expanding question to chew on. We've established as undeniable biological fact that through neuroplasticity, your brain is rewiring itself every single second based on your environment and your actions.
If that is true, I want you to take a hard, honest look at your daily digital habits.
Based on what you are feeding your mind today, the scrolling, the multitasking, the distractions, what kind of brain are you unknowingly training yourself to have by the time you go to sleep tonight?
Whoa, what kind of brain are you actively building today? That is a heavy, powerful thought. Think about that as you go about your day. Check your screen time and ask yourself if that's the neuroplasticity you want. Thank you for sprinting with us through part one. I feel like my own brain is buzzing just from unpacking all of this. But we are truly just getting started. In part two of this mini-series, we're going to take everything we built today and use it to dive deep into part two of the book, taking a sledgehammer to your limiting beliefs and destroying the 7 lies of learning. You absolutely won't want to miss it. Stay curious, stay limitless, and we will see you next time. Welcome back to the deep dive.
Yeah.
I've got your notes right here in front of me, and honestly, I am so fired up. If you're returning for part two of this 4-part exploration into Jim Kwik's Limitless, you already know we are on a very specific mission today.
Absolutely. The energy is high today.
It is. It really is, because in part one,
Yeah.
we laid out the map, right? We looked at the Limitless model, that whole intersection of mindset, motivation, and methods. But today, we're setting the map down.
We're getting into the engine room.
Exactly. We are zooming in on the actual mechanics of your brain. So we are exclusively unpacking the what, which is your mindset, covering chapters 5 and 6, and the why, which is your motivation, diving into chapters 7 and 8. It's going to be a sprint.
A dopaminergic sprint, I think we called it. And, to give you a framework for what we are about to do right now, think of your brain as a supercomputer.
Okay.
It is unequivocally the most sophisticated piece of technology in the known universe. But like any computer, its output is entirely dependent on its programming and its power source.
Right, the hardware and the software.
Precisely. So today we're doing a complete system overhaul. First, we are going to find and uninstall the malware. Those quiet, invisible, limiting beliefs that are just running in the background and eating up all your processing power.
They just drain the battery without you even knowing it.
Exactly. And once we wipe that malicious code, we are going to physically and biologically upgrade your power supply.
Uninstalling the malware and upgrading the hardware. I love that. So as you are listening to this, whether you are commuting, doing the dishes, maybe you're just sitting at your desk, I want you to strap in. We are picking up exactly where we left off, and we are going to get highly, highly tactical.
Let's do it.
Let's start with chapter 5, The Spell of Belief Systems. The book opens this concept with this really vivid, almost cinematic mental scene, and I want to walk you through it because it's stuck with me.
It's a powerful visual.
It really is. So picture a massive steel suspension bridge. It spans a raging river. But the structural supports have been compromised. The metal is groaning, these massive steel cables are snapping one by one, and there are dozens of cars teetering right on the edge.
Sounds like a summer blockbuster.
Right. Now imagine a superhero arrives on the scene, and this hero possesses the literal physical strength to hold that bridge together. They can save every single person on it. But as the bridge starts to collapse, the superhero just stands there, frozen,
Just watching it happen.
just watching. Why? Because there's a tiny, persistent whisper in their head telling them they aren't strong enough.
And see, it's a dramatic image, obviously, but the psychological reality it points to is profoundly true. It perfectly illustrates how our subjective beliefs dictate our objective reality.
Wow. Subjective beliefs dictating objective reality.
Right, because the hero has the physical power, but because they believe they lack it, that physical power is rendered entirely inaccessible. It's locked away. And this isn't just some comic book metaphor. This is the exact mechanism governing your day-to-day life.
It's happening to all of us.
Every day.
Yeah.
You might have the sheer cognitive capacity to learn a new language or lead a massive project at work or start a business. But if the underlying program running in your brain says you aren't smart enough or you don't have the discipline, you are going to freeze on the bridge.
You just won't act.
You can't. Your beliefs act as a completely invisible yet completely impenetrable barrier to your own capabilities.
Okay, but let me push back on that for a second, though. Because how do we know the difference between a quote-unquote limiting belief and just actual healthy self-awareness?
That's a fair question. Because, if I'm standing at the edge of a 20-foot canyon and my brain says you cannot jump across that, that's not a limiting belief holding back my potential. That's just physics keeping me alive.
Right.
So how are we supposed to spot the difference in our own lives?
That is the crucial distinction to make. What you are describing with the canyon is an objective assessment of physical reality. A 20-foot jump defies human biomechanics. That is a fact.
Right. Gravity always wins.
Gravity wins. A limiting belief, on the other hand, is a subjective evaluation disguised as an objective fact.
Oh, disguised as a fact.
Exactly. It's when you take a past failure or a perceived flaw or an opinion someone else gave you and you calcify it into a law of physics. Believing you can't jump a canyon is biological self-preservation. Believing you are bad at public speaking because you stumbled through a presentation in the 9th grade, that is a limiting belief.
One is based on empirical reality, and the other is just a ghost from your past.
Yes, a ghost that you are allowing to dictate your present. A subjective evaluation disguised as an objective fact. That makes so much sense. And it ties perfectly into that visceral analogy of the elephant and the peg.
Oh, the learned helplessness concept.
Yes, this really struck me from the reading. So in certain parts of the world, when they train elephants in captivity, they start when the elephant is just a baby. They tie one of the baby elephant's legs to a small wooden stake driven into the ground.
Just a tiny peg.
Right. Now, the baby pulls, it tugs, it fights, but it's too small. It simply doesn't have the mass to pull up the stake. So eventually the baby elephant stops trying. It internalizes a rule. The rope means I cannot move.
It learns its limitation.
Exactly. Fast forward a decade. This elephant is now a multi-ton adult. It has the strength to uproot full-grown trees. But the handlers still use the exact same tiny wooden stake and the exact same rope. And the adult elephant doesn't even attempt to break free.
It could just walk away.
It could snap that rope like a piece of cotton thread. But the belief holds it captive, not the physics of the rope.
And in behavioral psychology, this is a very well-documented phenomenon. It's known as learned helplessness. It was originally studied by a psychologist named Martin Seligman in the late 60s.
Seligman, right?
He found that if animals and humans, by the way, are subjected to negative situations they cannot control, they eventually stop trying to escape. Even when the situation changes, an escape becomes entirely possible later on.
We just give up.
We do. When we are children, we are essentially that baby elephant. We are highly impressionable, we don't know our own strength, and we look entirely to our environment to tell us how the world works.
We're just downloading the code.
Exactly. The author brings in belief change expert Shelley Lefkoe here, and she makes a brilliant point. She notes that we do not come into this world knowing if life is inherently hard or easy. We don't know if money is scarce or abundant. We don't know if our voice matters or if we should stay quiet.
We have to be taught those things.
We look to our parents, our early teachers, and our initial experiences to program those baselines.
So like an offhand comment from a stressed out parent or a teacher who told you that you were just a slow reader when you were 7 years old, those become the stakes.
Those are the stakes. You experience early friction and you unconsciously tether yourself to that tiny wooden peg. You learn to be helpless in certain areas. Maybe it's math, maybe it's intimate relationships, maybe it's physical fitness.
And then decades later,
You possess an adult's capacity to change. You can uproot the tree now, but you don't even try because the early programming is still running. You have accepted early impressions as permanent facts.
It's wild how the brain does that.
Yeah.
Jim Kwik uses these two acronyms to describe exactly what this malicious code looks like. He says we are constantly feeding ourselves LIEs, which stands for Limited Ideas Entertained.
Limited ideas entertained.
And I really want to highlight that word entertained, because you aren't just passively hearing these ideas, you are actively inviting them in. You're offering them a seat and letting them take up permanent residence in your mind.
You're hosting them.
Right. And because we entertain these LIEs, we operate on faulty BS, which stands for belief systems.
Faulty BS. It's a clever way to frame it. And if we want to understand why these LIEs and BS are so incredibly stubborn, we have to look at how the mind is actually structured.
The architecture of it all.
Yes. The authors of a book called Equilibrium are cited here, and they refer to these as iceberg beliefs.
Iceberg beliefs.
It's the perfect metaphor, because if you look at a real iceberg, the vast majority of its mass, up to 90% of it, is hidden deep beneath the surface of the dark water.
You only see the very top.
Exactly. Your conscious mind is just the tip of the iceberg, the part gleaming in the sun. That conscious mind is the part of you that buys the gym membership or sets the alarm for 5 a.m. or decides you are going to finally write that novel.
Okay.
But beneath the surface, embedded deep, deep in your subconscious, are these massive, entrenched belief systems.
So when I say I'm going to start reading a book a week, that's just the tip of the iceberg talking.
That's just the tip. But what's happening underneath?
Right. What is the 90% doing?
Underneath, your subconscious is running a script that says, you never finish what you start, or you aren't a fast reader, or people like you don't succeed.
Oh, wow.
And here is the brutal truth of human psychology. When conscious desire collides with the subconscious iceberg, the iceberg wins every single time.
Every time.
Every time. The subconscious processing power is millions of times faster and more deeply rooted than your conscious willpower. Willpower is weak compared to identity.
So that's why we self-sabotage.
Exactly. That is why you find yourself self-sabotaging. When you can't stick to a routine or when you procrastinate on a massive project, it's very rarely a lack of discipline.
It feels like a lack of discipline, though.
It feels like it, but it's an iceberg belief quietly steering your ship into the rocks to ensure your reality matches your internal programming. It wants you to be right about yourself more than it wants you to succeed.
Man, that is... Okay, so if the iceberg always wins, how do we ever change course? How do we fix the ship? The text gives us this mental model to shift our approach. And it's the difference between a thermometer and a thermostat.
This is a great analogy.
Think about how a thermometer functions. It is completely passive. Its entire existence is dedicated to just reacting to the environment. If the room gets hot, the liquid inside goes up. If the room gets cold, it goes down.
It has zero agency.
Zero. It just reflects whatever's happening around it. But a thermostat is entirely different. A thermostat is active. It sits on the wall. And yes, it senses the environment, but it has a program standard.
A set point.
Right. If the room drops below that standard, the thermostat kicks on the furnace. Yeah. It literally alters the environment to fit its desired internal state. So as you are listening to this right now, you have to ask yourself, when you face constraints, when the pressure at work mounts, or when things get difficult, are you just reacting? Are you letting the room dictate your temperature? Or are you the thermostat?
Are you changing the room? And to become the thermostat, to actively reject those environmental constraints and those subconscious icebergs, you have to break the trance.
You have to snap out of it.
You have to realize that these limiting beliefs are not facts. They are just a spell you've been under. And the book outlines a very practical 3-step spellbreaker framework.
Let's hear it.
Step 1 is name it. Now, this sounds simple, but it requires radical self-awareness. You cannot fight an enemy you cannot see. You have to start paying hyper-focused attention to your own internal monologue.
Like catching yourself in the act of self-deprecation.
Precisely. Every time you hear that inner voice whisper, I'm just not a numbers person, or I always choke under pressure, you have to pause and name it. You have to say, there is the limiting belief.
You're calling it out.
By naming it, you drag it out of the dark waters of the subconscious and into the conscious light where you can actually examine it.
Okay, so I've named the demon. I hear the voice saying, you are a terrible writer. What is step 2?
Step 2 is get to the facts. This is where you have to become absolutely ruthless. You need to treat your inner critic like a hostile witness on the stand in a courtroom.
No, I like that. Cross-examination.
Exactly. You don't just passively accept its testimony, you interrogate it. You demand empirical evidence. If the voice says, you are a terrible public speaker, you cross-examine it. Where are the facts? Have I ever actually been booed off a stage? Did people throw tomatoes? Did the company go bankrupt because of my Tuesday morning update?
But wait, what if the facts do show I failed? What if I genuinely got up on stage once, forgot all my lines, and had a full-blown panic attack? Isn't the belief valid then?
That is a great question, because sometimes we do fail. If you have a negative data point, you acknowledge it, but you contextualize it. Did you fail once because you were ill-prepared or because you are fundamentally biologically incapable of speaking?
Oh, okay.
The limiting belief takes one isolated negative event and extrapolates it into a permanent identity. The fact is that you failed an event. The lie is that you are a failure.
Failing an event versus being a failure.
Right. Most of the time, when you subject these beliefs to logical scrutiny, you'll find that your survival rate for these perceived disasters is literally 100%. You are still here. The evidence supporting the limiting belief is almost always incredibly weak. It's built on an exaggerated emotional memory rather than objective reality.
That distinction between failing an event and being a failure is huge. Which brings us to step 3, which is the best part. Create a new belief.
This is where the upgrade happens.
You've named the lie, you've interrogated it in court and proven it false, and now you have deleted the malware. You have an empty space on your hard drive, and you get to write the new code. You get to replace the faulty BS with an empowering truth based on the actual facts.
And it's so important that the new belief is grounded in reality, not just blind, toxic positivity.
Right, you can't just lie to yourself in the other direction.
Exactly. If the old belief was, I choke under pressure, and you've realized through cross-examination that you have actually survived and often navigated very tough moments, your new belief shouldn't be a delusion like, I am the greatest performer in human history.
Because your brain will just reject that.
It will reject it immediately as false. Your new empowering belief becomes, no one is perfect 100% of the time, but I am proud of how often I perform at my best when the stakes are high. That is a thermostat belief.
That changes the temperature of your mind.
Yes.
Boom. Thermostat mode engaged. And that transition from passively accepting our limitations to actively reprogramming them leads us right into Section 2, Chapter 6.
Yeah.
Because now we're going to take this spellbreaker technique and apply it to the most pervasive iceberg beliefs in our culture.
The lies we've been told about our ability to learn.
Yes. This is critical, because before we can talk about how to read faster or remember more, we have to dismantle the cultural conditioning that says your intelligence is fixed. There are 6 major lies about learning that most of us accept as absolute truth, and we need to unpack the history and the science behind why they are fundamentally false.
Let's tear them down.
All right, rapid fire. Lie number 1, intelligence is fixed. This is the myth that your brain is basically a hand of cards you were dealt at birth. You get your genes, you maybe take an IQ test in elementary school, and whatever number comes back, that's your lot in life. You're either the smart kid or you aren't, and there's nothing you can do about it.
It's fascinating how deeply ingrained this is, especially when you look at the actual history of IQ testing. Alfred Binet was the French psychologist who helped invent the very first intelligence tests in the early 1900s.
The famous Binet test.
Right. But what most people don't know is that Binet explicitly stated that his test did not measure innate permanent intelligence. Yes. He designed it simply to identify children who were struggling in the current school system at that specific time so they could be given extra help and individualized attention. He actually feared his test would be used to limit children.
And that's exactly what society did. We weaponized it.
Exactly. We turned a diagnostic tool into a rigid caste system of intellect. But modern neuroscience completely shatters this fixed view. If you look at the work of Dr. Carol Dweck at Stanford University, she pioneered the concepts of the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset.
Huge paradigm shift there.
A fixed mindset is the belief that your traits are carved in stone. But the neurological reality supports the growth mindset, which says intelligence is highly fluid. This is due to neuroplasticity. Every time you learn something new, your brain physically changes.
Literally rewiring itself.
Synapses fire, and as the famous neuroscience saying goes, neurons that fire together wire together. You can physically grow your brain's processing capacity through effort, proper strategy, and persistence. Your intelligence is not a static number, it is a muscle.
I love that. The brain is malleable. Okay, moving to line number 2. We only use 10% of our brains.
Oh, this
We
one.
have all heard this. It's the plot of movies like Lucy or Limitless the movie, not the book we're talking about. The idea is that 90% of your gray matter is just sitting up there dormant, collecting dust, waiting for some magic pill or secret technique to unlock its hidden power.
It is an incredibly alluring myth because it offers unearned hope. It suggests that you don't actually have to work hard, you just need to find the key to unlock the other 90%. The origins of this myth are a bit murky. It's often misattributed to William James or even Albert Einstein, but scientifically, it is absolutely false.
Completely busted.
Evolutionarily speaking, it makes zero sense.
Because the brain requires so much energy.
Precisely. The human brain is an absolute energy hog. It accounts for only about 2% of your total body weight, but it consumes roughly 20% of your body's energy and oxygen intake.
20%, that's massive.
It's huge. And the human organism is relentlessly efficient. Evolution would never expend massive daily amounts of caloric resources to grow and maintain an organ if it only utilized a tenth of it. If you look at an fMRI, a functional magnetic resonance imaging scan, you will see that even when you are just sleeping or doing a simple task like clenching your fist, almost all parts of the brain show some level of activity.
So the whole board lights up.
The whole board. The truth isn't that we need to unlock dormant areas. The truth is we use 100% of our brain, but we use it incredibly inefficiently. The goal isn't unlocking hidden compartments. It's optimizing the pathways.
Optimization over unlocking. That makes me rethink how I approach learning altogether. All right, lie number 3. Mistakes or failures.
This is a heavy one.
It is. This is the myth that getting something wrong means you are wrong. It is deeply tied to our ego and this intense fear of looking stupid in front of our peers. But let's look at Albert Einstein. He is the global symbol for absolute brilliance. Yet if you look at his life, it was filled with massive struggles, miscalculations, and theories that were flat out rejected.
People forget that part.
They really do. He famously introduced the cosmological constant into his theory of relativity, which he later called his greatest blunder.
And if we connect this to the neurobiology of learning, the way we label mistakes dictates our relationship with growth. When you make a mistake, your brain actually releases a specific cocktail of neurotransmitters, and there is a documented spike in attention.
Wait, really? A chemical spike?
Yes, your brain is saying, wait, the outcome did not match my prediction. Pay attention. A mistake is biologically designed to be a learning trigger. It forces focus. But it only becomes a failure if you attach emotional shame to it and stop trying.
So we let the shame override the biological data.
Exactly. The limit comes from the emotional weight we attach to the error. We need to reframe this with absolute scientific ruthlessness. There is no such thing as failure. There is only a failure to learn.
A failure to learn.
Every single mistake is just data. It is neutral feedback telling you what doesn't work so you can recalibrate your method. When you view mistakes as essential, inevitable stepping stones rather than permanent indictments of your character, you become scientifically fearless. You iterate faster.
That is such a relieving perspective, just pure data. Okay, line number 4. Knowledge is power. We see this quote everywhere, usually attributed to Sir Francis Bacon. It's this myth that simply acquiring information like reading a ton of books, scrolling through educational threads, or even listening to this deep dive right now automatically makes you a powerful, capable person.
This is arguably one of the most dangerous lies on the list.
Why dangerous?
Because it breeds the illusion of competence. It makes us feel highly productive when we are actually just being passive consumers. You can read the book Limitless, you can memorize every single word of it, but if you do not change a single daily habit, the knowledge is useless.
You just have a head full of trivia.
Exactly. Knowledge is not power. It is merely potential power. To use a physics analogy, knowledge is potential energy, like a massive boulder sitting at the top of a hill. It doesn't do anything until you push it. Action is the kinetic catalyst. The true belief you need to adopt is the equation. Knowledge multiplied by action equals power.
So let's apply that directly to you listening right now.
Mm-hmm.
If you hear us talk about the spellbreaker technique and you think, wow, that's really profound, but you never actually sit down with the journal to interrogate your own inner critic, you have gained 0 power today.
0.
You have to do the work. Okay, lie number 5. Learning is difficult. This is a heavy one too. For so many of us, just hearing the word learning brings up a visceral memory of trauma, shame, and the sheer mind-numbing boredom of childhood schooling.
Sitting at a tiny desk.
Right. We associate learning with struggling to stay awake under harsh fluorescent lights while someone drones on at a chalkboard about a subject we don't care about.
And that association is entirely understandable given how the traditional education system was constructed. The modern schooling model was largely designed during the Industrial Revolution.
Factory model.
Exactly. Its primary objective was to produce compliant factory workers. It prioritized rote memorization, sitting still for 8 hours, and strict conformity over natural human curiosity and engagement. But we must decouple the concept of learning from the environment of schooling.
That is a massive distinction. Schooling is not learning.
Precisely. The human brain is actually a learning machine. It is desperate for novelty and connection. When you discover how your brain actually processes information, when you utilize proper methods like spaced repetition, vivid mnemonic devices, and entering states of flow learning stops being a grueling chore, it aligns with your biology.
It becomes natural.
The new belief is that when you understand the mechanics of your own mind, learning becomes an exhilarating game. It becomes a process of continuous, joyful discovery rather than a forced march.
It's like trying to chop down a massive oak tree with a baseball bat and then someone finally hands you a chainsaw. The task isn't inherently painful anymore. You just spent years using the wrong tool.
Perfect analogy.
And finally, lie number 6. The criticism of other people matters. This is the iceberg belief that we have to shrink ourselves to fit into the comfort zones and expectations of the people around us, that their judgment defines our reality. The book shares this incredible anecdote about Jim Carrey. Jim Kwik is having a conversation with him, and Carrey says this brilliant line. He says, "I need to get really smart to be dumb and dumber."
It sounds like a joke, but it's actually a profound insight into performance psychology.
How so?
Carey understood that to perform at the absolute highest echelon of physical comedy, to be utterly uninhibited, totally absurd, and entirely fearless on screen, he had to consciously bypass the part of the brain that worries about social judgment.
Which is hard to do.
Very hard. Evolutionarily, our brains are wired to fear criticism. In early human history, being rejected by the tribe meant isolation, which meant death. That's why social criticism feels biologically threatening. We feel it in our chest. But Carey realized he had to be incredibly intelligent and self-aware to consciously orchestrate such unabashed silliness without a drop of self-consciousness.
It's reclaiming the shamelessness of a toddler.
Exactly. Think about a baby learning to walk. They stand up, take a step, and fall down. They do this hundreds of times. And not once does that infant sit on the floor, look around the living room, and think, wow, everyone thinks I'm a terrible walker. I look so foolish right now. I'm just going to quit and be a crawler for the rest of my life.
Right. They don't care.
They have zero concept of shame. They just have an overriding desire to walk. The fear of criticism is a learned behavior. It is a societal constraint, and it is the absolute enemy of living a limitless life.
Man, I am officially fired up.
Okay, let's take a breath. Look at what we've done. We've uninstalled the malware. We've taken a sledgehammer to the lies of the fixed mindset, the 10% myth, the fear of failure, the illusion of passive knowledge, the dread of traditional schooling, and the biological fear of criticism.
The hard drive is clean.
The hard drive is clean. Now, is it time to talk about the engine? Let's transition into Section 3, Chapter 7, the engine of motivation and purpose. Because we need to shatter a massive illusion right now. So many people think motivation is this mystical force, this magical fairy that visits you in the night. You either wake up with it or you don't.
Complete BS.
That is complete BS. Motivation is not a mood. It is a strategy. It is not something you passively have. It is something you actively do.
That is a critical paradigm shift, and it completely reframes how you approach your day. When you say, I just don't have the motivation to work out today, you are reverting to learned helplessness. You are putting yourself back in a passive trance, acting like a thermometer.
Waiting for the room to get hot. Exactly. To break that trance, we need to understand the actual mechanics of drive. The text introduces the master equation for this. It goes like this. Motivation equals purpose multiplied by energy multiplied by S3, which stands for small, simple steps.
P times E times S3.
Now, just to be clear, for our trajectory today, we are going to dive incredibly deep into purpose and energy right now, and we are going to save the tactical mechanics of S3 for our next session. But you must understand this foundational mathematical reality. If any of those three variables, purpose, energy, or S3 is at 0, your overall motivation is 0.
Because anything multiplied by 0 is 0.
Exactly.
So let's look at the first variable, purpose. You have to start with your why. We see this echoed across so many fields, famously by thinkers like Simon Sinek with his golden circle concept. If you want to push through the inevitable friction of doing hard things like studying advanced coding or rehabilitating an injury or launching a side hustle, you need a reason that is completely bulletproof. Why do you actually want this?
And that why has to be rooted deeply in your identity and your core values. It is not enough to have a superficial intellectual goal. If your goal is simply, I want to read more books, that's a nice thought, but it lacks gravitational pull.
It's too flimsy.
When the alarm goes off at 5 a.m., reading more books isn't going to get you out of bed. However, if you attach that goal to your identity, your internal I am statement, the power dynamic shifts.
Give me an example of that.
If your identity is, I am a lifelong learner who uses knowledge to protect, provide for, and inspire my family, the motivation to read becomes fierce. Furthermore, you have to establish a clear hierarchy of values. Are you driven by freedom, by connection, by mastery? When your daily actions are perfectly aligned with your highest internal values and fused to your identity, purpose shifts from a fleeting feeling to an inexhaustible fuel source.
I want to make this tangible for the listener right now. The book has this exercise regarding pain, and it is intense but incredibly effective. I want you to do this with us right now. Think about whatever it is you're trying to learn, change, or achieve in your life.
Bring it to mind.
Now, I want you to vividly imagine the actual agonizing pain of not changing. And I mean, really lean into it. Don't just intellectualize it and say, will it be suboptimal for my career? No. Feel it. Feel the sting of settling for mediocrity. Feel the absolute gut punch of watching a peer get the promotion and the financial freedom because you didn't put in the hours to upskill. Feel the heartbreak of not being truly present and energetic with your kids because you are constantly stressed and inefficient with your time. Sit in that discomfort.
It sounds dark doing that intentionally.
It does.
But there is profound neurobiology behind why this is necessary. Human beings do not make behavioral changes based purely on logic.
Right.
We make decisions based on emotion. Specifically, we are biologically hardwired by evolution to seek pleasure and avoid pain.
Pain is the ultimate driver.
And because of a cognitive bias known as loss aversion, which was studied extensively by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, the psychological pain of losing something is about twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining something.
Twice as powerful.
Yes. Often, the short-term discomfort of trying a new habit prevents us from acting. But if you can mentally amplify the long-term pain of staying exactly where you are till it massively outweighs the short-term pain of the effort required to change, you completely flip your motivational polarity. When the pain of inaction finally becomes unbearable, you become absolutely unstoppable. You compel your brain to act.
You have to make the status quo your absolute worst enemy. Okay, so you have your purpose.
Yeah.
You have your reason, driven by identity and the visceral need to avoid future pain. You are highly motivated on a spiritual and emotional level. But here is where so many ambitious people crash and burn.
A physical crash.
You can have the best GPS destination mapped out, and you can be the most eager driver in the world, but if your high-end sports car has zero fuel in the tank, you aren't leaving the driveway. This brings us to Section 4, Chapter 8, Generating Limitless Brain Energy. We have to talk about biological fuel.
Exactly. You cannot out-willpower a biologically depleted brain.
Say that again.
You cannot out-willpower a biologically depleted brain. Cognitive function is inextricably linked to physical vitality. There is a great parable in the text about a wise counselor that perfectly encapsulates this. A young student approaches this highly esteemed, brilliant counselor and asks, "Are geniuses born or made?"
A classic question.
The counselor replies, "Genius is made, not born. My skill is the result of discipline and practice." And what the text emphasizes is that this discipline doesn't just apply to reading or meditating. It extends to how you literally construct your biology. If you want to process information like a supercomputer, you have to supply it with the correct electrical current.
So let's get into the wiring. Let's get highly tactical. I'm going to walk through the high-octane brain fuel menu. These are the top 10 brain foods Jim Kwik swears by. Write these down. We've got avocados, blueberries, broccoli, dark chocolate, eggs, green leafy vegetables, salmon, turmeric, walnuts, and water. Now, normally when I hear a list like that, I just think, okay, eat a salad.
Just general health advice.
Right, but we said we were going deep. Why these specific foods? What is actually happening in the brain when we eat a walnut versus a donut?
The biochemical mechanisms here are fascinating, so let's break down a few of the heavy hitters from that list. Let's start with walnuts. Interestingly, a walnut actually looks like a miniature human brain.
It really does, with the two hemispheres.
It does. But visually aside, walnuts are incredibly high in DHA. DHA is a type of omega-3 fatty acid. Your brain is largely made of fat, and DHA is quite literally the structural building block of your brain's cerebral cortex, which is the area responsible for memory, language, and creativity.
It's the physical material.
Yes. If you don't have enough DHA, your brain literally struggles to build and repair the physical structures required for complex thought.
So eating walnuts is like delivering bricks to a construction site in the brain. What about blueberries? I see them on every superfood list.
Blueberries are packed with specific antioxidants called anthocyanins. Now, to understand why this matters, you have to understand oxidative stress. As your brain consumes all that energy we talked about earlier, it produces waste products called free radicals.
The exhaust fumes.
Exactly. These are unstable molecules that can damage your brain cells. Antioxidants are the defense system. They neutralize free radicals. The specific antioxidants in blueberries have been shown in studies to actually cross the blood-brain barrier, directly protecting the brain from oxidative stress and delaying brain aging and memory decline.
That's incredible. And turmeric. I know it's a spice, but how does it act as brain fuel?
Turmeric contains an active compound called curcumin. Curcumin is a potent anti-inflammatory. Chronic inflammation in the body leads to brain fog and cognitive decline. But beyond just reducing inflammation, curcumin has been shown to boost levels of BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor.
BDNF.
We will touch on this more in a moment, but BDNF is essentially a growth hormone for your brain. It directly supports neuroplasticity, which is your brain's ability to form entirely new neural connections.
Let me throw one more at you from the list. Dark chocolate. Because I feel like people always use that as an excuse to eat candy. What's the actual science there?
The key distinction is dark chocolate, specifically cacao with an 80% or higher concentration, not processed milk chocolate loaded with sugar. Pure cacao contains flavanols. These compounds have been shown to stimulate the endothelium, the inner lining of your blood vessels, to produce nitric oxide.
And what does nitric oxide do?
Nitric oxide causes your blood vessels to dilate, which massively improves cerebral blood flow. More blood flow means more oxygen and nutrients reaching your neurons exactly when you need them to perform. And finally, let's not overlook the most basic element on that list: water. Your brain is roughly 80% water. Every electrical signal, every production of ATP, the energy currency of your cells requires water. Even a 2% drop in hydration can cause a noticeable decrease in cognitive function, memory, and focus. You are literally, physically upgrading your gray matter with these elements.
So food is hardware maintenance. But it's not just what you put in your body, it's what you surround your body with. The book talks about clearing your environment, and I know exactly what this feels like. Have you ever tried to write an important email or study for a certification while sitting at a desk covered in old coffee mugs, stacks of unopened mail, and tangled charger wires?
It's impossible.
It feels almost physically impossible to concentrate. Why is that?
Because it is neurologically taxing. Your physical environment is deeply connected to your cognitive load. Your brain is a processing machine. Even when you are staring straight ahead at your computer screen, your brain is subconsciously processing all the visual stimuli in your peripheral vision.
Scanning the room.
Every coffee mug, every piece of mail, every tangled wire is a piece of visual data that your brain has to evaluate and then actively decide to ignore. A cluttered external environment forces your brain to work overtime just filtering out distractions. This drains the exact same battery power you are trying to use for focus and learning.
Wow.
A clean, minimalist external environment creates a clean, organized internal environment. It literally frees up cognitive bandwidth.
Bandwidth, exactly. You're closing out all the background apps running on your desktop. And speaking of freeing up bandwidth, we have to talk about exterminating the ANTs. Not the insects on your kitchen counter. ANTs stands for automatic negative thoughts.
Automatic negative thoughts.
This is a term coined by Dr. Daniel Ammon, a clinical neuroscientist, and it is such a perfect descriptor. These are those little intrusive thoughts that crawl into your brain out of nowhere. You're going to fail. You look stupid. This is too hard. Why did you say that?
And just like real ants at a picnic, if you ignore one, it leaves a pheromone trail and 100 more will show up to ruin the party. You have to mentally squash these bugs the moment you notice them. And this isn't just self-help platitudes, this is endocrinology.
Take that down.
Every single negative thought you have generates a biochemical reaction. It signals your amygdala that you are under threat, which triggers the sympathetic nervous system. And while useful if you are running from a predator, chronic cortisol physically inhibits the hippocampus, which is the learning and memory center of your brain. By applying our spellbreaker technique, naming the ANT and reframing it, you are literally protecting your cognitive battery from being drained by a manufactured biochemical stress response.
I love the visual of squashing ANTs to protect the hippocampus. Okay, to round out this entire energy protocol, we have to hit the absolute non-negotiables: sleep and sweat. Because let's be honest, if you are sleeping 4 hours a night and sitting rigidly in a chair for 12 hours a day, all the blueberries and positive thinking in the world are not going to save you.
That is the hard, unavoidable biological truth. Let's look at sleep first, because our understanding of what sleep actually does has exploded in the last decade. Sleep is not a passive state where your brain just powers down.
It's not just off.
No, it is an incredibly active biological process. During deep sleep, your brain initiates a vital maintenance program via the glymphatic system. Think of the glymphatic system like the night shift janitorial crew in a massive office building. They only come out to clean when the lights are off and the workers have gone home.
Okay, I like that.
During deep sleep, your glial cells actually shrink in size, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to rush through the brain and literally wash away metabolic waste and neurotoxins that built up during the day.
Hold on, let's back up. It physically washes the brain. What kind of neurotoxins are we talking about?
One of the primary waste products flushed out is a protein called amyloid beta. This is critical because the buildup of amyloid beta plaques is directly associated with cognitive decline and Alzheimer's disease.
That is terrifying.
If you chronically deprive yourself of sleep, you are preventing that janitorial crew from working. You are allowing toxic waste to literally build up in your brain tissue, leading directly to brain fog, poor memory retention, and compromised focus the next day. Sleep is non-negotiable for memory consolidation and cellular repair.
Okay, so sleep washes the brain. What about sweat? What about exercise?
Movement is the other half of the equation. Aside from the obvious cardiovascular benefits, aerobic exercise floods the brain with oxygen. But more importantly, physical movement triggers the release of that compound we mentioned earlier, BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor.
Right, the growth hormone.
John Rady, a psychiatrist at Harvard, famously called BDNF miracle grow for the brain. When you exercise, you are signaling your body that you need to adapt, and BDNF is released to encourage the growth of entirely new neurons and the fortification of existing synapses. It primes the brain for learning. Sleep and sweat are the non-negotiable bedrock of cognitive dominance.
Miracle grow for the brain. I love that. All right, let's take a breath and synthesize everything we've just explored, because we have covered massive ground today. Look at what you've achieved just by absorbing and processing this information. We opened up the hood and uninstalled the faulty belief systems holding you back. We dragged the subconscious icebergs into the light.
The spell is broken.
We shattered the cultural lies about fixed intelligence, the 10% myth, and the fear of failure, proving that your potential is entirely fluid and neuroplastic. We ignited a burning core of purpose by connecting your goals to your deepest identity and making the pain of staying the same completely unbearable. And finally, we showed you exactly how to sled your biological engine with the highest grade physical energy through specific nutrients, environmental design, squashing automatic negative thoughts, and respecting the hard science of sleep and sweat. You are primed. The machine is ready.
But we must acknowledge that the master equation of motivation is not yet complete. We have the purpose, and we now have the energy. But remember the formula. Motivation requires one more crucial multiplier. Next time, in part 3, we are going to unlock S3, the small, simple steps.
Oh, man.
We will explore how to bypass the friction of procrastination entirely, how to slip into the elusive, hyper-productive state of flow, and we will finally cross the threshold into the ultimate methods of focus and accelerated learning.
I cannot wait for that conversation. It's going to be the catalyst that sets all this potential energy into motion. But before we sign off, we want to leave you with something to chew on. Something to keep your mind actively expanding until we meet again.
Think about this. We've established today that your mental limits are largely just a spell cast by old memories, and your physical exhaustion is often just a battery that needs the right biological fuel. So what happens the moment you consciously code a new belief that makes charging that battery your absolute favorite thing in the world?
Wow.
If you genuinely use the spellbreaker technique to reprogram yourself to believe that eating right, sleeping deeply, and ruthlessly challenging your own assumptions was the ultimate biological high, where does the limited you end and the limitless begin?
Where does the limitless begin? I'm going to be thinking about that all day. Listen, until next time, keep your thermostat set high, keep squashing those ANTs, and keep feeding that incredible brain of yours. We will see you back here for part 3 as we continue our deep dive into unlocking your exceptional life.
Welcome back. If you're listening to this right now, I really want you to take just a second to acknowledge the ground you've already covered.
Yeah, it's been a massive journey.
It really has. Because this is part 3 of our 4-part deep dive into unlocking your limitless potential. And, we have spent hours unpacking the lies and limiting beliefs that were essentially holding your mindset hostage.
We stripped all of that down.
Completely. And then we rebuilt your core purpose. We optimized your brain energy. You've basically built this unbreakable foundation of motivation. You've done the really heavy psychological lifting.
But today we're shifting gears.
We're crossing a bridge. We're taking all of that potential energy and turning it into pure kinetic energy.
We really are. We are moving from the why, your motivation and mindset directly into the how. This is the realm of limitless methods. We are looking at the actual mechanics of execution today.
The dopaminergic sprint.
Exactly. We're going to break down the exact science of small, simple steps. We're going to decode the neurological state of flow. We're going to talk about literally weaponizing your focus. And finally, we're going to completely unlimit how your brain absorbs and studies information.
So grab whatever fuels you. Coffee, matcha, a massive glass of water, because we are getting straight into it. And I want to start with an equation that completely reframes how I think about getting things done.
It's a game changer.
It is, because you can have all the life purpose in the world, right? You can have your diet and your sleep dialed in so your energy is peaking. But if you are missing this third variable, you're essentially just revving a high-performance engine while the car is stuck in neutral.
Going nowhere fast.
Right. So the formula for sustainable motivation is this. Motivation equals purpose times energy times S cubed. S to the third power.
Small, simple steps.
Yes, small, simple steps.
Then that third variable, S cubed, is where most ambitious people just fall apart. I mean, they have the vision, they have the drive, but they approach the execution entirely wrong.
They try to do too much.
Way too much. A small, simple step is the tiniest possible action you can take to get closer to your goal. I'm talking about an action that requires almost zero activation energy.
Like ridiculously small.
Exactly. We're talking about breaking a task down until it is so microscopic that your brain cannot possibly perceive it as a threat or a burden. Over time, these micro actions compound and they become automated habits. It's a mechanism that just completely bypasses the overwhelming friction that usually paralyzes us.
Let's give that a visual, because abstract concepts are hard to hold on to, especially if you have an ADHD brain like mine. Think about a stonecutter. Picture someone standing in front of a massive, solid granite boulder.
Wow.
They have this heavy sledgehammer, and they swing it with everything they have, striking the stone. Nothing happens, not even a chip.
Right.
They hit it a second time, a third time, 10 times, 50 times. The boulder looks exactly the same as it did before they started. They hit it 100 times, totally exhausting themselves, and there is no visible effect whatsoever. But then, on the 101st strike, they bring the hammer down, and the entire boulder splits perfectly in half.
What's so beautiful about that metaphor is the underlying physics, which perfectly mirrors human neuroplasticity. I mean, was it that final 101st blow that broke the stone?
No, it was the 100 before it.
Exactly. It was the microscopic internal fractures created by all the impacts that came before it. Every single swing of that hammer was causing structural changes deep inside the granite, even though nothing was visible on the surface.
Which is exactly how you have to approach learning.
Yes, your projects, your habit formation, every small, simple step is a strike on the boulder. You are literally wrapping neural pathways in myelin, making the connection stronger, even if you don't see the outward results on day 3 or day 10.
But the problem is, so many of us try to be the sledgehammer instead of the stonecutter. We try to smash our goals in one giant, exhausting 20-hour weekend sprint.
Which never works.
Never. And when the boulder doesn't break immediately, when we don't have a six-pack after 3 days at the gym or a fluent grasp of Spanish after a week of cramming, we just quit. We get completely overwhelmed.
And that feeling of overwhelm isn't just a lack of discipline. It's a very specific cognitive mechanism. To understand why we feel that crushing weight, we have to talk about something called the Zeigarnik effect.
I am absolutely fascinated by this.
It's an incredible piece of psychology. It dates back to the 1920s. There was a Russian psychologist named Bluma Zeigarnik. She was observing a busy, incredibly crowded restaurant in Vienna.
Just total chaos, right?
Total chaos. People everywhere, loud conversations, complex orders flying around. And she noticed that the waiters were highly efficient at remembering massive, multi-part customer orders without writing a single thing down.
Which is insane to me.
Right. They could hold all these distinct changing variables in their working memory while the orders were in process. But, and this is the crazy part, the exact second the bill was paid and the transaction was finished, the waiters instantly forgot what the customers had ordered.
Wow.
They couldn't recall if they tried. The information completely vanished.
It's like their brains just hit the empty trash button the millisecond the check was signed.
Precisely. Zeigarnik realized that incomplete tasks create a specific kind of cognitive tension. When a task is unfinished, it stays active in your working memory, creating a subconscious pull. Your brain marks it as a threat, or at least an unresolved issue that requires constant background monitoring.
We call those open loops.
Yes, open loops. The brain holds onto them, continuously allocating resources to keep the incomplete task front and center until it's resolved.
So if you are listening to this right now, I want you to think about your own life. Think about that project you're procrastinating on, or that awkward email you haven't replied to, or the doctor's appointment you haven't scheduled.
We all have them.
We all have them. And you might think you are successfully ignoring those things because you're watching television or scrolling on your phone, but your brain isn't ignoring them. You have these open loops running in the background of your mind, literally functioning like apps draining your smartphone's battery.
That's a great analogy.
They're eating up your mental RAM and creating immense subconscious tension.
And that tension severely drains your cognitive and emotional resources. The psychological weight of the unresolved task makes it feel like an unscalable mountain. Psychologist Hadassah Lipsik has noted that these incomplete tasks lead to frequent intrusive thought patterns.
Like waking up at 3 a.m. thinking about an email.
Exactly. They ruin your sleep quality, they spike your resting cortisol levels, and they trigger chronic anxiety. Your brain is essentially screaming at you that there is unfinished business. And because the task feels so massive, it leads straight to paralysis.
You just freeze.
You look at the entire project as one giant boulder. Your brain calculates the energy required to smash it, realizes it doesn't have the capacity, and simply shuts down the operation.
And what do we do when we hit that paralysis? We start attacking ourselves. We layer immense guilt and shame right on top of the anxiety. We sit on the couch thinking, why can't I just get up and do this? What is fundamentally wrong with me?
Which is the worst possible biological response.
It really is.
Dr. Art Markman, a psychology professor at the University of Texas, has done extensive work on this. He points out that feeling guilty when you are paralyzed and unable to work is entirely unhelpful. In fact, shame actively makes people procrastinate more.
Because it feels terrible.
Because shame is a highly uncomfortable negative emotion, your brain seeks immediate relief from it. And how does it get relief? By distracting you with something easy like social media or junk food, pushing the task even further away.
It's a vicious cycle.
Giving yourself a hard time isn't just unhelpful, it is psychologically counterproductive. It reinforces the paralysis.
So how do we break the cycle? The only way to close the loop, to relieve that agonizing subconscious tension, is by taking a baby step. You have to stop looking at the boulder.
Stop looking at the boulder.
You don't have to write the whole 50-page business proposal today. You just have to open a new document and type the title. You don't have to run 5 miles. You just have to put your running shoes on and tie the laces. You close the loop on step 1 and nothing else.
Because the moment you complete that microscopic subtask, the Zeigarnik effect actually works in your favor. You lift a heavy psychological weight off your mind. The brain registers a completion.
You get the hit.
You get the hit. It releases a small amount of dopamine, which is a neurochemical reward, and suddenly the activation energy required for step 2 doesn't seem so impossible. You've initiated momentum.
Let's transition this into the anatomy of autopilot. Because taking one small step is great, but if we want to build a limitless life, we need these small steps to compound into permanent habits.
That absolutely.
And to understand how habits work, we have to look at how much of your life is already running on a pre-written script. Here is a staggering fact. Roughly 40 to 50% of what you do every single day is pure automated habit.
Half your day.
Nearly half of your waking hours are governed by automaticity. You don't consciously think about how to brush your teeth, or the route you drive to work, or the way you unlock your phone. It just happens.
To understand how to hijack that automation for your benefit, we should look at the fundamental habit loop.
Yeah.
Look, everyone listening is likely familiar with James Clear's basic model. Cue, craving, response, reward.
The classic.
We know why we eat the junk food. We see the pantry, that's the cue. We remember the salt, the craving. We eat the chips, the response. We get the dopamine, the reward. We all understand the basic mechanics of how a bad habit forms. But how do we actively engineer good habits from scratch?
That's the real question.
For that, we need to look at Dr. B.J. Fogg, the founder of the Behavior Design Lab at Stanford University. His model takes the concept of the habit loop and turns it into pure behavioral engineering.
This is where it gets incredibly practical. Fogg says that long-term behavior only changes through 3 avenues. The first is an epiphany. You have a near-death experience or a sudden, massive realization that changes your worldview overnight.
But we can't schedule epiphanies.
Right, so that's not a viable strategy. The second is a total change in your environment. You move to a new country or throw away your television. Effective, but often impractical. That leaves the third avenue, baby steps.
Right. And Fogg breaks this down into an equation. B equals MAP. Behavior occurs when motivation, ability, and a prompt all converge at the exact same moment. If any one of those 3 variables is missing, the habit simply fails.
It has to be all 3.
All 3. You need the desire to do it, the capacity to do it effortlessly, and a trigger that tells you to start.
Let's zoom in on the ability part of that equation, because this is the core of the S-cubed concept. What actually makes something easy enough for our brains to willingly adopt it? Fogg outlines 6 specific factors of simplicity.
These 6 factors are brilliant because they force you to audit exactly why you are failing to build a habit. First is time. We only perceive a task as simple if we feel we have the time for it. If a new workout routine takes 90 minutes and you only have 30, it fails the time test.
And honestly, it's often about perceived time. If my brain thinks meditating for 20 minutes is going to eat up my entire morning, the friction is just way too high.
Exactly. The second factor is money. If adopting the behavior stretches your finances or requires an expensive upfront investment, it is not simple. Friction increases.
Makes sense.
The third is physical effort. It has to be physically easy to initiate. If you want to start going to the gym, but the gym is a 25-minute drive across town in heavy traffic, the physical effort required just to get there will kill the habit before you even lift a weight.
That makes total sense. You want the gym that is literally on your exact route home from work. What's the fourth factor?
Brain cycles. This is crucial. You cannot heavily tax your cognitive load. The human brain is a massive energy consumer. It uses about 20% of your body's energy despite being only 2% of your weight.
It's an energy hog.
By evolutionary design, the brain wants to conserve energy. So we naturally shy away from things that require us to think too hard. If your new habit requires you to make 10 complex decisions before you even start, you will abandon it.
So if you want to eat healthier, don't make your habit cook a complex, new, multi-step, nutritious meal every night. That requires way too many brain cycles after a long workday. Make it put pre-cut vegetables on a pan and roast them.
Exactly. Reduce the cognitive load. The fifth factor is social deviance. This one is fascinating.
I love this one.
The behavior has to fit reasonably within your social norms, or it causes psychological friction. If all your coworkers go out for heavy lunches every day, and your new habit is to sit at your desk alone eating a salad, that requires you to go against the tribe.
Which we hate doing.
Humans are hardwired to conform for survival, so social deviance makes a habit incredibly difficult to sustain.
That is so true. We underestimate the invisible pressure of just wanting to fit in with the people around us. And the sixth factor,
Non-routine. How far outside your normal daily rhythm is the new behavior? The further it is from your established routine, the harder it is to adopt. If you are a night owl and you suddenly try to implement a 5:30 a.m. journaling habit, that is a massive disruption to your routine. It won't stick.
So the goal is to engineer your new habits to require as little time, money, physical effort, brain power, social disruption, and routine disruption as possible. You shrink the boulder until it is literally a pebble.
A tiny pebble.
But even if it's a pebble, Fogg says you still need a prompt. You need something to tell you to actually do the thing.
Yes. Without a prompt, the behavior remains dormant. Fogg outlines 3 distinct types of prompts. The first is a spark. A spark is a prompt that triggers an immediate emotion, usually fear or anxiety.
Like what?
For instance, receiving an alarming email from your doctor about your cholesterol might prompt you to immediately adopt a habit to alleviate that fear. It sparks action.
But relying on fear isn't a great long-term strategy. What if my motivation is high, but the task is still a bit too hard?
Then you need the second type of prompt,
Yeah.
a facilitator. This makes a hard thing easier. Imagine you are highly motivated to learn a new language, but opening the textbook feels daunting. A facilitator prompt would be an app notification on your phone that says, tap here to do a 2-minute audio lesson.
Oh, I see.
It takes a high motivation, low ability situation and provides a frictionless bridge to action.
And the third type.
The third is a signal. This is the most common and effective for daily habits. This is for when both your motivation and your ability are already high. You just need a pure environmental reminder.
Got it.
If your goal is to drink a large glass of water first thing in the morning, the signal is simply filling the glass and placing it on your nightstand the evening before. It is a visual cue in your environment that triggers the automated response.
I want to tie all of this behavioral science together with an acronym that makes it really actionable for the listener. It is the WIN protocol. WIN. If you want a small, simple step to evolve into a permanent, limitless habit, it needs to pass this test.
Let's hear it.
First, W. You must want it. You cannot sustainably force a habit that you fundamentally hate or one that you're only doing because someone else told you to. It has to tie back to your core purpose.
That alignment is key.
Second, I. It must be innate. It needs to align with your natural abilities and your daily rhythms. It shouldn't feel like a constant uphill battle against your own biology or personality. And third, N. It must happen now. You need that clear prompt, that signal in your environment to trigger the action immediately without deliberation.
When you align the W, the I, and the N, you completely bypass the friction that stops 99% of people from executing their goals. You stop relying on willpower, which is a finite, exhaustible resource, and you start relying on architecture.
If anyone listening is skeptical about whether these microscopic adjustments can actually change a life, I want to share a story from the source material. It's the story of Shang, and it is a testament to the raw power of this methodology.
It's a profound story.
Shang battled severe schizophrenia and clinical depression. This wasn't just a lack of focus, he was dealing with debilitating auditory hallucinations, literally hearing voices telling him to hurt himself. It led to multiple stints in psychiatric wards. His cognitive function was under siege.
It's important to understand the cognitive toll of a condition like that. It shatters executive function and the ability to organize thoughts or initiate tasks. Overwhelm is a constant, suffocating baseline.
Exactly. But Shang found this S-cubed methodology. He couldn't take massive leaps, so he started taking micro steps. He began doing tiny daily exercises to introduce novelty and gentle stimulation to his brain. Things like brushing his teeth with his non-dominant hand or taking 2 minutes to memorize a few words.
Ridiculously small things.
Yes, but those small, simple steps began to close the open loops in his mind. He started rebuilding his cognitive architecture step by step. He built momentum. He began to regain control over his focus and vastly improved his mental state. It is a stunning, undeniable proof that no matter how deep the hole is, the human brain responds to the consistent application of small, structured steps.
It proves that neuroplasticity doesn't require giant, traumatic swings of a sledgehammer. It responds to the steady, persistent tapping of the stonecutter.
No, if the small, simple steps are the foundation, the things that clear the mental clutter, we need to talk about what happens when your mind is finally clear.
The fun stuff.
Because when you close those open Zeigarnik loops, you free up a massive amount of background brain RAM. And when you direct all that freed up RAM at one single meaningful task, you trigger something extraordinary. We are moving into Chapter 10. We are talking about flow.
Flow. This is arguably the holy grail of the optimal human experience. It is the state where peak performance meets peak experience.
If S-cubed is the slow, steady stonecutter, flow is a cinematic superpower. It is the telephone booth where Clark Kent walks in as a mild-mannered reporter, rips open his shirt, and emerges as Superman.
I love that image.
It is that hyper-focused state where the rest of the universe just drops away, where you are so completely locked into what you're doing that your actual sense of self vanishes.
The scientific term flow was popularized by the late psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. After studying artists, athletes, and scientists, he described it as a state of complete immersion. The experience itself becomes so intrinsically rewarding, so inherently enjoyable, that people will do it for the sheer sake of doing it, regardless of external rewards.
It just feels that good.
It does. And 6 Cent Miley identified 8 distinct characteristics that define this state.
Let's break those 8 characteristics down because I guarantee everyone listening has felt this at least once in their life, even if by accident.
The first characteristic is absolute concentration on a specific task. Your attention isn't divided, it is a laser beam. The second is a total focus on clear goals. You know exactly what you are trying to achieve in that moment.
The third is one of the most fascinating to me, a distorted sense of time. When you are in flow, it feels like time is either speeding up, where 5 hours pass in what feels like 5 minutes, or time slows down to a crawl, and you have all the time in the world to react.
That time distortion is actually rooted in neuroscience. When you enter flow, your brain undergoes something called transient hypofrontality.
That's a big word.
Transient meaning temporary, hypo meaning less, and frontality referring to the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the part of your brain responsible for complex decision-making, self-doubt, and calculating time.
Oh, wow.
In flow, that part of the brain actually deactivates or quiets down. Since the brain's clock is shut off, your perception of time completely vanishes.
That is incredible. The brain literally turns off the inner critic.
Exactly.
Okay.
Which leads to the fourth characteristic, a profound feeling of reward from the experience itself. It feels incredibly good. The fifth is a sense of effortlessness. Even if the task is physically or mentally demanding, the execution feels smooth and unforced.
The sixth characteristic is that the activity is in the Goldilocks zone. I want to highlight this. The task cannot be too easy, or you will get bored and your mind will wander. But it cannot be too difficult, or you will get frustrated and anxious. It has to match your highest skill level perfectly, forcing you to stretch just slightly beyond your current limits.
Right. It requires full capacity, but not an ounce more. The seventh characteristic is that your actions and your awareness merge. It feels like the actions are happening on their own, automatically, without conscious thought. And finally, the eighth characteristic is a deep sense of control over the task. You feel completely capable of handling whatever arises.
To make this real, let me share Patrick's story from the research. Patrick struggled intensely with ADHD his entire life. The traditional school system failed him. He couldn't focus at work. He struggled to be present with his family. And he even struggled during his Brazilian jiu-jitsu tournaments.
Which is dangerous.
Very. On the mat, his brain would go into overdrive, trying to consciously calculate every possible move and countermove at once. He was overwhelmed by the variables, but then he learned about the mechanics of flow. He learned how to quiet his prefrontal cortex. And in his next tournament, he deliberately tapped into that state.
And the result was a classic manifestation of transient hypofrontality.
Exactly. He said the world literally slowed down around him. He described it as being exactly like Neo dodging bullets in the Matrix.
That is so cool.
He wasn't thinking about the moves anymore, he was just reacting. He could see his opponent's weight shifting and predict the attacks before they even happened. His brain stopped fighting itself, stopped calculating, and just flowed.
That Matrix moment isn't magic, it is biology. Stephen Kotler, the founder of the Flow Research Collective, has done brilliant work mapping the neurobiology of this state. He calls flow the source code of motivation.
The source code.
Why? Because when you enter flow, your brain releases a cascade of 5 of the most potent neurochemicals: dopamine, norepinephrine, endorphins, anandamide, and serotonin. It is the most powerful dose of reward chemistry your brain can possibly produce naturally.
Better than anything else.
It makes the state highly addictive, which drives you to return to the activity again and again. But Kotler also outlines a critical framework that most people completely misunderstand. He mapped out the 4 specific stages of the flow cycle.
This is the trap. This is where I always messed up. I assumed that flow is just supposed to feel amazing from the very first second you sit down to work. If it felt hard, I assumed I wasn't in flow, so I would quit and go check my email.
That is the most common misconception.
Right.
Stage 1 of the cycle is the struggle. This is when you are gathering data, doing the hard research, warming up your body, or staring at the blank page. I have to be clear with everyone listening. The beginning of flow sucks.
It really does.
It feels like the exact opposite of flow. It is marked by frustration, friction, and a sense of inadequacy. Your brain is releasing cortisol and adrenaline. If you quit during this struggle phase, which is what most people do the second it gets hard, you never reach the reward. You have to push through the friction.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate here. If it feels like a frustrating struggle, how do I know if I am on the path to flow or if I am just doing a task that I fundamentally hate and shouldn't be doing? Where is the line?
That ties back to the WIM protocol. You must want it. If the task aligns with your core purpose, then the struggle is just productive friction. It's the cognitive load of loading the information into your working memory. If you're doing something you despise, the struggle is just misery.
That's true.
Assuming it is aligned with your goals, you push through the struggle until you hit stage 2, relaxation.
This is the counterintuitive part.
Very. You cannot force yourself directly from struggle into flow. The brain needs a transition. The relaxation phase is an essential break. You step back from the problem, take a walk, you do some deep breathing, you look out a window.
Just disconnect for a second.
Yes. What happens biologically here is profound. By taking your mind off the heavy lifting, you shift your nervous system from sympathetic, fight or flight, to parasympathetic, rest and digest. This shift triggers the release of nitric oxide, which flushes the stress hormones out of your system and opens up your blood vessels.
And it is that precise chemical release that drops you through the trapdoor into stage 3, flow, the Superman experience. The prefrontal cortex shuts down, the neurochemical cocktail floods your system, and you execute effortlessly. Time vanishes.
But you can't stay there forever. Flow consumes a massive amount of metabolic energy. Eventually, you shift into stage 4, consolidation. This is the come down.
The crap.
You might feel a little tired, or even a bit irritable or let down because the neurochemical high is fading. But this phase is critical. This is where the brain wires and everything it just learned. It is cementing the new neural pathways created during the flow state.
So if we understand the biology, how do you, the listener, summon this superpower on demand? We have 5 triggers to help you enter the zone. Listen closely, because these are environmental prerequisites. Trigger number 1, eliminate distractions. And I mean completely.
Non-negotiable.
If you are trying to write a report and you get distracted by one single text message, studies show it takes your brain up to a grueling 20 minutes to fully regain its prior level of focus. We call that attention residue. You cannot enter flow if you are constantly resetting that 20-minute clock.
Trigger number 2, block out 90 to 120 minutes. As we just discussed with Kotler's 4 stages, flow doesn't happen instantaneously. It takes time to move through the struggle and relaxation phases. You cannot reach peak flow in a 15-minute window between Zoom meetings. You must give yourself at least an hour and a half of dedicated blocked time.
Trigger number 3, do something you genuinely love. As we established, you are not going to hit a superhuman flow state doing monotonous data entry that you despise. The brain just won't release the dopamine required. It has to be something that matters to you.
Trigger number 4, have crystal clear goals. Ambiguity is a massive flow preventer. If you sit down at your desk and say, I'm going to work on my business, your brain casts around looking for a specific mission. It wastes cognitive energy. But if you say, I am going to write the introduction to the investor pitch deck, you give your brain a precise target to lock onto.
And trigger number 5, push yourself just slightly outside your comfort zone. Find that Goldilocks zone. If you are an expert guitar player and you play Mary Had a Little Lamb, you won't enter flow, you'll be bored. If you try to play a blindingly fast Jimi Hendrix solo you've never practiced, you'll be frustrated. You need a task that requires you to stretch your current abilities by about 4 to 5%. That slight tension pulls you directly into the zone.
But just as there are triggers, there are enemies. There are supervillains of flow that are constantly lurking in our modern environment, trying to extinguish your state before it even begins.
Let's identify these 4 supervillains so you can block them. Villain number 1, multitasking. This is the mortal enemy of flow. Let's be clear, the human brain cannot do 2 complex cognitive tasks at once, period. What you are actually doing is task switching rapidly, which drains glucose from the brain and makes flow chemically impossible.
Villain number 2, stress. Stress ambushes your focus. If you are deeply worried about an argument you had with your partner this morning, that argument acts like an unclosed Zeigarnik loop. It consumes your background processing power, keeping you anchored in the struggle phase and preventing the relaxation required to enter flow.
Villain number 3, fear of perfectionism. Think about this logically. To enter flow, you have to push yourself slightly outside your comfort zone, which means you are operating in a space where mistakes are likely. If you are terrified of not being perfect, you will never push those boundaries. You will stay in the safe, boring zone. Perfectionism kills the willingness to stretch and therefore kills flow.
And villain number 4, lack of conviction. If you don't really believe in the value of what you are doing, your brain recognizes the incongruence. It won't commit the massive metabolic energy required to enter the zone for a task it deems meaningless.
If you can eliminate the villains and implement the triggers, you can access this state. But there is a prerequisite to flow. Flow requires an intense, unbroken beam of attention. Which brings us to Chapter 11, the crux of human success. Focus. Focus is simply the ability to direct your brain power to burn through a task.
It is the foundational skill of the 21st century. In an attention economy, the person who can sustain focus is the person who wins.
And to really understand focus, I want to introduce an image from Dandapani, a Hindu priest and entrepreneur. This concept completely rewired how I think about my own attention span. We all say, my mind is wandering, my mind is bouncing all over the place. Dandapani argues that your mind isn't actually moving at all. The mind is a stationary, expansive space. What is moving is your awareness within that space.
That is a profound philosophical and psychological distinction.
Think of your awareness as a physical, glowing ball of light. When you sit down to work, that glowing ball of light is hovering right over your laptop. You are focused, but then your phone buzzes on the desk. The glowing ball of light physically floats away from the laptop and hovers over your phone.
We've all been there.
Then you remember you need to buy groceries for dinner, and the glowing orb floats over to a mental image of the supermarket. Your mind isn't broken, your awareness is just traveling to different sectors of it. True concentration isn't about freezing the orb in place perfectly. It is about using your willpower to notice when the light has drifted and consciously dragging that glowing ball of awareness back to the task at hand.
Exactly. Dandapani points out a harsh truth. We don't actually practice concentration. What we practice is distraction. We spend 10 to 12 hours a day letting our environment and our technology pull that glowing orb from one app to another, from one notification to another, from one tab to another.
Exhausting.
We are world-class experts at being distracted because we practice the neurology of distraction all day long. If we want to build focus, we have to consciously practice pulling the awareness back.
And it is a constant, exhausting fight, especially because of the physical environments we put ourselves in. Let's talk about the hard neuroscience of clutter. A lot of people claim that having a messy desk is a sign of creative genius. They think they thrive in chaos. But the data says the exact opposite.
It absolutely does. A landmark study from the Princeton University Neuroscience Institute looked at how the brain processes a cluttered environment. They proved that physical clutter in your visual field literally competes for neural representation in your visual cortex.
What does that mean for the listener?
To put that in accessible terms, your visual processing system has limited bandwidth. Every single stray piece of paper, every dirty coffee cup, every random sticky note on your desk is a physical object that your brain is actively having to process, identify, and then consciously suppress so you can look at your computer screen.
So it's like having 20 different tabs open on your computer browser. Even if you are only looking at one tab, the other 19 are still eating up your RAM in the background.
That is exactly what is happening in your visual cortex. It is draining your brain's processing power and causing neural fatigue. The rule is incredibly simple, but scientifically profound. Clear your desk, clear your mind, remove the objects that are demanding your brain's background attention.
But the science gets much darker than just feeling tired from a messy desk. Let's talk about what constant distraction is actually doing to the physical structure of your brain. Let's talk about the shrinking brain.
Yes. Studies from University College London and the Max Planck Institute use functional MRI scans to look at the brains of heavy media multitaskers, people who are constantly jumping between screens, watching TV while scrolling on their phones and checking email.
Which is pretty much everyone.
Which is everyone. They found that these individuals literally have less gray matter density in a region called the anterior cingulate cortex, or the ACC.
What does the ACC actually do?
The anterior cingulate cortex is a critical part of the brain involved in cognitive control, emotional regulation, and most importantly, focus and attention. Because these heavy multitaskers were never sustaining deep focus, that part of the brain was literally atrophying. It was physically shrinking due to constant distraction. It's the neurological equivalent of a muscle wasting away because it's never used.
That is terrifying. Our brains are physically adapting to our terrible habits. We are actively breeding the ability to focus out of our own biology. But there is a silver lining here, right?
There is. The hopeful part of the Max Planck study is the reality of neuroplasticity. They found that among people who went through sustained attention training exercises, their ACC actually grew thicker. The gray matter density increased. You can literally rebuild and thicken the physical structure of your brain's focus center through deliberate practice.
Okay, so how do we start that rebuilding process? How do we practice focus when the world is chaotic? We have 3 specific hacks to calm a chaotic mind. Hack number 1, breathe. Specifically, we look at Dr. Andrew Weil's 4-7-8 method.
This isn't just a relaxation trope. It is a powerful physiological intervention. The way you breathe directly dictates the state of your nervous system. The 478 method stimulates the vagus nerve. You exhale completely through your mouth with a whoosh sound. Then you close your mouth and inhale quietly through your nose to a mental count of 4. You hold that breath for a count of 7. Then you exhale completely through your mouth with a whoosh sound to a count of 8. You do that cycle 4 times.
Why the specific numbers?
The extended hold and the prolonged exhale are the key. By exhaling longer than you inhale, you force your heart rate to slow down and you artificially shift your body from the sympathetic fight or flight state into the parasympathetic rest and digest state. It forcefully calms your physiology, which in turn quiets the chaotic mind, allowing you to center that glowing orb of awareness.
Hack number 2, confront the stressor. This goes right back to the Zeigarnik effect. If you sit down to focus on a creative project, but your awareness keeps drifting to a stressful email you need to send to your boss, you are fighting a losing battle. The open loop is consuming your ACC. Sometimes the best way to focus on task A is to spend 5 minutes completely resolving task B. Just send the email. Confront the stressor, close the loop, and reclaim your background processing power.
But obviously, you can't always resolve the stressor immediately. If you're worried about paying a mortgage bill that isn't due until Friday, you can't fix it on Tuesday morning. That is where you use hack number 3. Schedule your distractions.
I absolutely love this technique because it sounds absurd, but it works flawlessly. If your brain will not stop obsessing over that bill, you literally open your calendar app and block out 4:15 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. with the title, Worry About the Mortgage.
It's so simple.
By giving the anxiety a specific, guaranteed, scheduled time to exist, you trick your brain. You are telling your subconscious, I acknowledge this threat, we have a plan to handle it, just not this second. The brain feels safe, it closes the loop temporarily, and your glowing orb of awareness comes right back to the present moment.
It's a brilliant form of cognitive compartmentalization. You manage the intrusive thoughts by giving them a container, rather than exhausting yourself trying to suppress them, which sets us up perfectly for the ultimate application of all these methods. We've optimized the habits, we've decoded flow, we've built the focus architecture. Now what do we do with it? Chapter 12, from cramming to true mastery. How to unlimit your study.
If you are going to be a lifelong learner, whether you are a student, a professional trying to upskill, or just someone who wants to read more, you have to understand the journey of learning itself. We call this the competence ladder.
It's a psychological progression that everyone experiences when acquiring a new skill, and understanding it prevents you from quitting early. Level 1 is unconscious incompetence. You don't know what you don't know. You're completely unaware of the skill and your lack of it. Think of a child who doesn't even know what a bicycle is.
Ignorance is bliss at this stage.
Exactly. But then you move to level 2, conscious incompetence. You are now aware of the skill and you acutely realize how bad you are at it. You get on the bicycle and immediately fall over. This is the most frustrating stage and where most people quit. Level 3 is conscious competence. You can perform this skill, but it takes intense, active effort and focus. You can ride the bike, but you have to stare at the handlebars and constantly think about balance.
It takes a lot of cognitive energy.
Right. Level 4 is unconscious competence. The skill is now second nature. You can ride the bike while having a conversation or looking at the scenery. The neural pathways are fully myelinated. But there is a 5th level beyond the standard model, true mastery. This is where you operate at an elite, limitless level. You aren't just doing the skill automatically, you are innovating, adapting, and teaching it effortlessly.
And if we want to reach that level of true mastery in anything we study, we have to aggressively dismantle the absolute worst study habit in modern culture, the all-nighter. I'm begging everyone listening, and the tradition of cramming. We wear it like a badge of honor. Oh, I stayed up until 4 a.m. cramming for this presentation. It is a myth that it works. It is biologically toxic to long-term memory retention.
It fundamentally ignores the neurological rules of memory formation, specifically the primacy and recency effects. The brain is hardwired to remember things that happen at the beginning of an experience, the primacy effect, and things that happen at the end of an experience, the recency effect. When you study in short bursts, say 45 minutes, you have a beginning and an end. But when you cram for 10 hours straight without meaningful breaks, you only have one beginning and one end with a massive 9-hour blur in the middle that your brain simply will not encode.
Plus, you are sacrificing the one thing that actually builds the memory: sleep.
Precisely. Memory consolidation primarily happens during sleep, specifically during slow-wave sleep and REM cycles. During the day, your hippocampus gathers information, But it's only when you sleep that the hippocampus transfers that data to the neocortex for permanent long-term storage. If you pull an all-nighter, you skip the very biological process that saves the information to your hard drive. The data just gets overwritten the next day.
So, throughout the all-nighter, what do we do instead? We have 7 specific scientifically backed hacks to unlimit how you study, and we are going to dive deep into the mechanics of each one. Hack number 1, active recall.
Active recall is the antidote to the most common studying mistake: passive review. Most people try to learn material by just reading the textbook or their notes over and over again. They look at the page and think, yep, I know that. What they are actually experiencing is the illusion of competence. They confuse recognizing the words on the page with actually recollecting them.
It's like recognizing a song on the radio versus having to sing it a cappella from memory. Totally different skills.
Exactly. Dr. William Clem, a neuroscience professor at Texas A&M, has shown that to build a durable memory, you must force your brain to generate the answer from scratch. You have to read a concept, close the book, look away, and actively recite or write down what you just learned without any cues. That internal struggle to retrieve the information is the exact mechanism that thickens the neural pathway. The harder it is to recall, the stronger the memory becomes once you retrieve it.
Hack number 2, spaced repetition. This pairs perfectly with active recall.
This is how you defeat the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve.
Mhm.
In the late 19th century, Hermann Ebbinghaus discovered that if you learn something once, your brain will naturally discard the vast majority of it within a few days, because it assumes it's not crucial for survival. But if you review it using active recall, and then review it again a day later, then 3 days later, then a week later, then a month later, you are drip-feeding the information at expanding intervals.
You are basically sending a signal to your brain saying, hey, this keeps coming up in my environment. It must be important for my survival. Don't delete it.
Exactly. You hijack the brain's evolutionary triage system to store the information permanently.
Hack number 3, manage your state.
All learning is state-dependent. The physical and emotional state you are in when you study is deeply intertwined with the information itself. From a purely physical standpoint, your posture directly dictates the oxygen flow to your brain. If you are slouched over a desk, tired, and compressing your diaphragm, your breathing becomes shallow. Your brain isn't getting the oxygenated blood it needs to function at peak capacity. Sit up straight, open your chest, and breathe deeply.
But it's emotional, too.
Very much so. Emotion acts like the chemical glue for memory. The formula we use is information times emotion equals long-term memory. If the emotion is 0, if you are bored out of your mind, the resulting memory is 0. You have to actively choose to be fascinated. Sit at your desk and act as if you were about to decode the greatest secrets of the universe. Manufacture curiosity, and your brain will encode the data.
Hack number 4, use your sense of smell. This sounds like alternative medicine, but it is one of the most visceral biological hacks you can use.
It is pure neuroanatomy. Your sense of smell is uniquely wired. Senses like sight and sound are routed through the thalamus, which acts like a switchboard. But your olfactory bulb, the smell center, has a direct, unfiltered neurological connection to the amygdala and the hippocampus. Those are the emotional and memory centers of the brain.
So smell bypasses the middleman.
It does, which means you can use it to trigger state-dependent memory retrieval. If you sniff a specific, distinct scent, like peppermint or rosemary essential oil, while you are studying a complex topic, your brain links that scent to the data. Then when you go into the exam room or step on stage for the presentation, you put a tiny dab of that exact same scent on your wrist. When you smell it, it physically stimulates the hippocampus and pulls the linked memory back to the surface. It is a biological cheat code for retrieval.
I used to do that with specific flavors of gum, and it absolutely works. Hack number 5, music for the mind. The environment you create around your study session dictates your brainwave state.
Audio is a massive environmental cue. We talked earlier about the chaotic beta brainwave state, which is erratic and stressed. You don't learn well in beta. You want to shift into an alpha brainwave state, where your mind is relaxed but highly receptive and alert. Playing Baroque music, think Bach or Vivaldi, that operates specifically at 50 to 80 beats per minute is highly effective for this.
Why that specific tempo?
Because 50 to 80 beats per minute mirrors the resting human heart rate. Through a process called entrainment, your physiological rhythms begin to sync with the rhythm of the music. Your heart rate stabilizes, and your brain waves naturally smooth out from the choppy beta frequency into the rolling rhythmic alpha frequency. In alpha, your brain stops defending itself against stress and starts absorbing information like a sponge.
Hack number 6, listen with your whole brain. We use the acronym HEAR, H-E-A-R. Let me break this down because most people are terrible listeners. Studies show that most people forget 75% of a talk or a lecture within 48 hours. If you want to be limitless, you cannot be most people. H stands for halt. You have to physically stop doing everything else. Put the phone in another room. Stop typing. You cannot multitask.
E is for empathy. This ties back to state-dependent memory. Try to truly feel the speaker's intent, their passion, or their urgency. By adopting their emotion, you create that emotional glue that makes the information stick.
A is for anticipate. Active listening is a sport. You should be leaning in, constantly asking your internal monologue, where are they going with this? What is the next logical point? By anticipating, you engage your prefrontal cortex deeply. And finally, R is for review. If you want to lock it in, paraphrase what they just said in your own mind or ask a clarifying question.
Which brings us to the final tool in the study arsenal. Hack number 7, take note of taking notes. Traditional note-taking, where you just try to transcribe exactly what the professor or the speaker is saying, word for word, is a passive activity. It does not engage the critical thinking centers of the brain.
Exactly. You become a human tape recorder, which is terrible for retention. You want to use a method called capture and create. Here is how you do it practically. Draw a line straight down the middle of your notebook page. On the left side, you capture. That is where you write down the actual objective information the speaker is delivering, the dates, the formulas, the core concepts. But the magic happens on the right side.
The right side is where you create. This is rooted in what cognitive psychologists call the generation effect. You learn better when you generate your own context. On the right side of the page, you write down your subjective impressions. You write down questions that pop into your head. You write down analogies that make sense to you. Most importantly, you write down action items, how you can actually apply this concept to your own life or business. By doing this, you are actively digesting and synthesizing the material in real time.
Synthesizing all of this brings us to a really grounded, profound reality. We have covered an immense amount of ground in this deep dive. If you look at the architecture we just built, you now possess the ultimate toolkit for execution. You have the S-cubed microsteps to completely bypass procrastination, quiet the Zeigarnik effect, and build habits that don't rely on willpower. You understand the precise environmental triggers and neurological stages to access the Slipperman state of flow. You know how to direct your glowing awareness to thicken your attention cortex. And you have the hard neurobiological hacks to optimize your study and absorb information permanently.
It is everything you need to successfully cross the bridge from pure motivation into tangible, limitless execution.
But before you jump into your day, I want to leave you with a thought to mull over. I want you to combine two of the biggest concepts we unpacked today: the Zeigarnik effect's open loops and Dandapani's glowing ball of awareness. Think about your life right now. Look at your stress, your burnout, your feeling of being stuck. What if your entire perception of reality, that feeling that you aren't making progress, isn't a lack of talent or intelligence? What if it is simply a massive series of unclosed loops constantly stealing your glowing ball of light? How much of your true, limitless genius is currently trapped, acting as background processing power for things you just haven't dealt with? What is the one open loop you can close today, right now, using a small, simple step to get your light back?
That is the question that changes everything. Identify the loop and take the step.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. You have the tools, you know the exact methods. Now it is time to go apply them instantly. Close that loop. We will see you for part 4.
Welcome back to the grand finale of our 4-part deep dive mini-series. We've been spending a lot of time systematically unpacking the ultimate toolkit for your brain.
We really have.
And if you've been with us for the journey so far, you know exactly what we've been building toward. Over the past few conversations, we've completely dismantled the old limiting mindset.
Breaking down all those deeply held, usually subconscious beliefs about what you actually thought you were capable of learning.
Exactly. And then we unlocked motivation, digging into the underlying purpose, the literal neurochemical energy required to take sustained action. But today
is the climax.
Today is about the final M in the limitless model we've been exploring. Today is all about methods.
Right. Because if we look at this through the lens of a journey, mindset is your map. It tells you what is possible, where you can go. Motivation is the fuel in your tank. Because without it, you're just sitting in the driveway.
It's like revving the engine but going nowhere.
Exactly. But methods are the precise, high-performance driving techniques that actually get you to your destination faster and safer than you ever thought possible.
I love that.
So think of this deep dive as a massive, systematic upgrade to your internal operating system. We are taking the theories we've discussed and applying them directly to the mechanical reality of how you learn, how you read, how you remember, and how you critically think.
Framing it as an operating system upgrade is perfect because I think a lot of us are walking around running on cognitive software that we essentially downloaded in the third grade.
And we never hit the update button.
Never. We just kept running the legacy software.
Yeah.
So for everyone listening right now, the mission today is highly, highly practical. We're going to look at the exact mechanics of memory, how to stop forgetting the things that matter.
And how to process written information at speeds that seem almost impossible, at least until you understand the science of the human eye.
Right. And finally, we'll explore the specific mental models used by top-tier decision makers to just cut through the noise.
To really set the tone for this, I want you to visualize something. I want you to imagine stepping out of your normal, everyday reality and walking into a high-tech training simulator designed specifically for your brain.
Okay, setting the scene. I'm in.
The lights dim. The room around you transforms into this vast, illuminated matrix of glowing neural pathways. Every single connection, every microscopic spark of electricity firing in that matrix represents a piece of knowledge, a memory, a skill you've acquired.
It's like stepping into the Matrix, literally.
Exactly.
Sure.
And for your entire life, you might have looked at other people and believed that they just won the genetic lottery, that they have a good matrix and you were stuck with a bad one.
Which is so discouraging.
But cognitive science and the specific source material we are diving into today completely shatters that myth. There is fundamentally no such thing as a good or bad memory.
Say that again because I think people need to hear it.
There is no such thing as a good or bad memory. There is only a trained memory and an untrained memory.
A trained memory versus an untrained one. That is a crucial distinction. It completely shifts the narrative from this fixed trait you're just stuck with at birth to a skill you can actively develop.
It puts the agency entirely back in your hands.
It really does. But before we can actually train that memory, we have to unlearn the biggest fallacy most of us hold about how the brain actually stores information.
The container myth.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know for myself, for the longest time, I visualized my brain as a container, like a cup or maybe a computer hard drive.
And you get to this point where you feel overwhelmed by a new topic.
And you literally think, my brain is full. I can't possibly shove any more data in there. You almost feel like if you learn a new fact, an old fact is going to just fall out of your ear to make room for it.
It's an incredibly common misconception, probably born from the way we talk about technology, but it is neurologically flawed. Memory does not operate like a physical storage unit with finite square footage.
So what is the better analogy then?
To really grasp this, you have to stop looking at memory as a container and start looking at it as a muscle.
A muscle. Okay.
Let's think about physical anatomy. What happens to a physical muscle when you don't use it? If you break your arm and the doctor puts it in a rigid sling for 6 weeks, when that cast finally comes off, your arm hasn't stayed the same.
No, it's totally weak. It's shriveled up.
The muscle has completely atrophied, it physically shrinks and weakens due to lack of use, while the brain operates on the exact same biological principle of neuroplasticity. The connections grow stronger with use, and they prune themselves away with neglect.
Use it or lose it.
Exactly. It's use it or lose it. And the dangerous reality of our modern, hyper-connected world is that we are constantly putting our memory muscle into a digital sling.
Oh, a digital sling. You're talking about outsourcing our cognitive load to our devices, aren't you?
Yes.
Because I feel this acutely. I used to know 20 different phone numbers by heart when I was a teenager.
We all do.
Now, I barely know my own spouse's phone number because my smartphone does the remembering for me. I don't remember directions to a restaurant across town because the GPS does the heavy lifting.
The experts call it digital dementia. Our memory muscle is getting weak simply because we never ask it to lift any heavy weights anymore. We've outsourced the gym.
Outsource the gym. That hurts because it's so true. We've totally abdicated our responsibility to remember.
We have. But the beautiful, redeeming quality of a muscle is that it can always be trained to grow stronger, regardless of how weak it might feel right now.
So how do we start the training?
The foundation of that training, according to our sources, comes down to a very elegant, simple acronym. It's the MOM hack. MOM.
Okay, walk us through MOM.
When you want to remember something instantly, you need to run it through this filter. The first M stands for motivation.
Which ties right back to our previous deep dive on the emotional drivers of learning.
Deeply relevant. Because the brain is an incredibly efficient organ. It consumes about 20% of your body's energy while only making up 2% of its weight.
Wow, 20%. It's an energy hog.
Massive. So because it's so energy hungry, it ruthlessly deletes information it deems irrelevant. If there is no underlying drive, no emotional resonance or logical reason to remember something, your brain's efficiency mechanism kicks in and simply drops the data.
This makes so much sense when you look at real-world scenarios. Think about a time you were at a networking event or maybe a dinner party. Someone walks up, shakes your hand, looks you in the eye, and tells you their name.
And 3 seconds later,
3 seconds later, they're still talking, and their name has completely vanished from your mind.
gone.
And what do we tell ourselves? We say, oh, just terrible with names. We blame our bad memory.
But wait a second. Imagine if right before that person walked up, someone handed you a heavy briefcase filled with $1 million in cash and said, listen carefully. If you can remember the name of the very next person you meet for the rest of the evening, you keep the money.
I guarantee you, with absolute certainty, you would remember that person's name.
You would engrave it in your mind.
Yes. Your biological memory didn't suddenly upgrade in 5 seconds. Your motivation did.
That is a brilliant illustration. You gave the brain a compelling, emotionally charged reason to retain the data. You essentially told your hippocampus, this piece of information is critical for survival or extreme reward. Do not delete this.
Do not delete. I love that. So that's the M, motivation. What's the O?
The O in MOM stands for observation. And this is perhaps the most humbling realization about memory.
Humbling how?
Most of the time, when you think you have forgotten something, you actually haven't forgotten it at all.
Wait, really?
Really? You simply never encoded it into your brain in the first place because you weren't paying attention. You were not present.
Ouch. Yeah, that hits close to home.
It's true, though, right?
It's an attention issue, not a retention issue. When that person at the party is telling me their name, I'm not really listening. I'm thinking about what clever thing I'm going to say next to impress them. Or I'm looking over their shoulder to see if the host is bringing out the appetizers.
Or worrying about an email.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm everywhere except in the present moment, so my brain never even records the name. Observation is really just a proxy for profound presence.
Beautifully said. It requires a deliberate slowing down of your internal monologue to actually receive the input. And once you have the motivation locked in and the observation dialed up, you apply the final M in MOM.
Which stands for methods.
Methods. These are the specific, actionable techniques we are upgrading right now. And to understand the most powerful method for memory, we have to look at a truly fascinating piece of cognitive research known as the Baker-Baker paradox.
Oh, the Baker-Baker paradox. This completely changed how I view the brain's filing system. Let's unpack this study because it sounds like a riddle, but it reveals the fundamental secret to accelerated learning.
It does. The study comes from a researcher named Jillian Cohen. Imagine this scenario. You bring a group of test subjects into a room and you show them 2 photographs of 2 different men.
Okay, 2 photos.
You point to the first photograph and you tell the subjects, this man's last name is Baker, capital B, Baker. Then you point to the second photograph and you tell them, this man's occupation is a baker, lowercase b, Baker.
Got it. Name versus job.
Right. Sometime later, you bring the subjects back and ask them to recall the information associated with the photos. The statistical results are incredibly consistent and astounding. People consistently remember the occupation. They remember that the second man is a baker.
But the first man.
They almost entirely forget the name of the first man, Mr. Baker.
Which is wild, right?
Yeah.
If you look at it objectively, it is the exact same sequence of letters. B-A-K-E-R. It takes the exact same amount of audio processing to hear the word. So why does the brain cling so tightly to one and completely drop the other? What is mechanically happening in our heads that causes that discrepancy?
It all comes down to how the brain connects and anchors new information. The name Baker is an abstract floating concept. It has no tether. To the brain, a name is just arbitrary auditory data.
Just noise, essentially.
Right. But the occupation Baker triggers an immediate multi-sensory cascade of associations.
Okay, walk me through that cascade.
The moment I say the word Baker in the context of a job, your brain doesn't just hear the word. It instantly conjures a rich tapestry of sensory memories. Your olfactory bulb might faintly recall the smell of fresh yeast and baking bread.
I'm smelling it right now.
Your visual cortex pictures a white apron or a dusty bakery window. You might have a tactile memory of flour on your hands or the warmth of an industrial oven. The occupation creates a massive interconnected web of neural associations.
And the abstract name.
The abstract name has no web, it just slips right through the cracks.
It's almost like the brain needs Velcro. If a piece of information is perfectly smooth, like a random person's last name, there's nothing for it to stick to. But the concept of a baker has 1,000 little hooks of sensory detail, and it grabs onto the neural pathways.
Velcro is a perfect way to picture it.
And this leads us directly into what the source material calls the fundamental rule of all learning, the law of association, which essentially states that literally every piece of new information you will ever acquire in your life is entirely about connecting something you don't know to something you already know.
Exactly. You are taking the smooth, unknown data and intentionally covering it in Velcro by linking it to a vivid, established memory.
You're actively building a mental bridge. Consider a simple word like cherry. To a computer, cherry is just 6 letters. It's a string of binary code. But to the human brain, cherry is an experience.
Right. It's the color red. It's the sensation of sweetness.
It's the memory of a summer pie. It is the physical act of spitting out a pit. When you learn to harness this consciously, you bypass rote memorization entirely.
Because rote repetition is the most inefficient way to learn.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you want to memorize a list of 100 random words, you do not just repeat them over and over like a parrot hoping they stick. Instead, you create a vivid, absurd, highly sensory story that links the first word to the second and the second to the third. By turning abstract data into a connected, visual, emotional narrative, you are speaking the brain's native language.
You're basically turning your mind into a Hollywood movie director.
Yes. And what's amazing is that the more absurd or funny the association is, the better it sticks. Because emotion acts like a highlighter pen for the brain.
Give us an example of how you'd use that.
Okay, so if I need to remember to buy milk, batteries, and a new umbrella, I don't just repeat that list. I visualize myself standing in the pouring rain, holding a giant glowing umbrella that's shooting sparks because it's powered by massive batteries. And instead of rain falling from the sky, it's raining gallons of milk.
That is ridiculous.
It sounds totally ridiculous, but my brain will never forget that image. And we can start stacking these memory hacks too. If we combine this law of association with some of the environmental cues we discussed in earlier deep dives, the results are explosive.
Precisely. You begin layering the methods. For instance, you combine these visualization techniques with spaced repetition.
Which is reviewing information at gradually increasing intervals.
Right, which hacks the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. Or you alter your environment to support the cognitive state. The text suggests playing Baroque music, specifically pieces that play at around 60 beats per minute in the background while you are learning complex information like a new language.
I found the Baroque music recommendation fascinating. Why specifically that genre and that tempo? What is it doing mechanically to the brain?
It's a matter of biological synchronization. A tempo of 60 beats per minute closely mimics a resting human heart rate. When you listen to it, your heart rate naturally aligns with the rhythm.
It calms you down.
It lowers your blood pressure and reduces cortisol, the stress hormone. But more importantly, this specific auditory stimulation encourages the brain to shift from the high alert, scattered beta brainwave state into an alpha brainwave state.
And alpha is what we want for learning.
The alpha state is characterized by relaxed alertness. It is the exact neurological state where the brain is most receptive to absorbing and encoding new information. So you aren't just passively listening to music. You are literally biohacking your brainwaves to optimize your memory muscle.
Okay, so if we have successfully biohacked how we store and retain information, if we've upgraded the memory drive, the obvious next bottleneck is the intake speed.
How fast we can read.
Right. How fast can we actually absorb the data we want to memorize? Which means we have to dive into section 2, speed reading.
Let's set the stakes here because they are incredibly high.
They really are. We are living in an unprecedented information deluge. To put this in perspective, Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, pointed out a staggering statistic. He noted that from the dawn of human civilization all the way to the year 2003, humanity generated a total of about 5 exabytes of information.
5 exabytes.
Today, because of the internet and digital communication, we generate that exact same amount of information every 2 days.
It is a profound paradigm shift. We have moved from an era of information scarcity, where access to a library made you powerful, to an era of information overwhelming abundance.
We are constantly drowning in emails, industry reports, newsletters, Slack messages, books.
In this environment, reading is no longer a leisurely luxury reserved for a quiet Sunday afternoon. It is a critical competitive survival skill. There is a common adage that leaders are readers, and it holds true because your ability to adapt and lead is directly gated by your ability to process new information.
If your reading speed is capped at the level it was in middle school, you are operating at a severe disadvantage.
It is the ultimate bottleneck. But before we can talk about accelerating that speed, we need to do some diagnostics. We have to identify the hidden barriers that are currently dragging your reading speed down to the bottom of the ocean.
The anchors. The source material outlines three massive anchors that most people don't even realize are holding them back. Yeah. Let's look at the first barrier, which honestly sounds a bit counterintuitive. It's a lack of focus.
You would naturally assume that if you are reading slowly, you are focusing more on the text.
Exactly. But the text argues the exact opposite.
It does seem paradoxical, but it makes perfect sense when you understand how much processing power the human brain actually has. Your brain is a supercomputer. When you read slowly, feeding it information word by painful word, your brain simply isn't stimulated enough.
It gets bored.
It essentially says, is this all the data you're giving me? I have massive surplus processing power right now, so I'm going to go find something else to do. And that is exactly when your mind wanders.
You are reading a paragraph about economics, but your surplus attention is daydreaming about what you're having for dinner, or analyzing a conversation you had yesterday, or listening to the hum of the air conditioner.
A bored mind does not concentrate.
I experience this constantly. I will read an entire page of a book, get to the bottom, and realize I have absolutely no idea what I just read because my mind was entirely focused on an argument I had in my head with someone 3 years ago.
You were physically looking at the words, but cognitively you were checked out.
The slow speed literally caused the distraction, which leads right into the second major anchor, regression.
Regression is an incredibly exhausting, often unconscious habit. It is the act of backskipping.
Like rereading the same line.
Exactly. You read a sentence and your eyes instinctively dart back to reread a word you just passed. Then you move forward a bit and your eyes dart back again to check another word.
Why do our eyes do that?
If we look at the mechanics of the eye, our eyes don't read in a smooth, continuous glide. They make tiny, rapid jumps called saccades, and then pause briefly to take in words, which are called fixations. When you constantly regress, you are forcing your eyes to make unnecessary backward saccades.
It destroys your forward momentum.
It disrupts the flow of comprehension and rapidly drains your mental energy. It's like trying to drive a car while pumping the brakes every 3 seconds.
It's a terrible way to drive. But as frustrating as regression is, I think the third barrier is the one that blows people's minds because it is so deeply ingrained in our psychology. It is the habit of subvocalization.
Subvocalization. This is the silent speech you engage in while reading. It is that little voice inside your head that is practically reading the words aloud to you right now.
To understand why this is such a massive barrier, we have to look at how you were taught to read in the first place. Think back to when you were a child. You likely sat cross-legged in a circle on a classroom rug, and the teacher made everyone take turns reading out loud from a book.
It was often a high-pressure, stressful situation. You were terrified of mispronouncing a word in front of your peers.
Yes. During this critical developmental window, your brain made a hardwired neurological association. It decided, in order to understand a word, I must hear myself say it.
And we just never broke that habit.
Never. I catch myself doing it all the time. If I'm reading an email from my boss, I actually hear my boss's voice in my head, dictating the email to me.
It sounds harmless, but here is the devastating consequence of that habit. If you have to say every word in your head to understand it, then your reading speed is artificially capped by your talking speed.
You are fundamentally limiting your visual processing to the speed of your vocal cords.
Exactly. And the average talking speed is only about 200 to 250 words per minute, but your thinking speed, your visual processing speed, it is vastly, exponentially faster than that.
This is a profound realization that unlocks speed reading. Your mind can process visual information almost instantaneously.
Consider this. When you are driving and you see a red octagonal sign on the side of the road, you do not subvocalize the letters STOP in your head, sound out the word, and then decide to hit the brakes.
No, you instantly comprehend the symbol of the sign and react.
Or when you see the logo of a famous brand, you don't read the letters. You absorb the meaning in a fraction of a second. Speed reading is fundamentally about training your brain to treat written words more like visual symbols and less like auditory speech.
Which completely busts the biggest myth out there. The myth that reading fast means your comprehension will drop. People think, if I read faster, I'm going to miss the details.
The fast equals bad mindset.
Exactly. But the text uses a brilliant analogy to dismantle this. Imagine you were driving your car at 20 miles per hour down your quiet suburban neighborhood street. What are you doing?
You're completely relaxed.
Right. You're drinking coffee, you're changing the radio station, you're waving to a neighbor walking their dog, you're singing along to a song. Your focus is everywhere except the road, because the speed is so slow. It demands almost no cognitive attention.
But now, change the scenario.
Imagine you are strapped into a high-performance race car, blasting down a professional track at 150 miles per hour, taking tight hairpin turns. Are you thinking about your dry cleaning? Are you casually sipping a latte?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. You have absolute laser-focused tunnel vision on the road ahead. Your life depends on it.
The visual of the race car perfectly captures the physiological requirement of high-speed processing. Faster speed inherently demands greater focus. And because you are hyper-focused, you're actually absorbing the context and meaning of the text far better than when you are reading slowly and daydreaming.
So the million-dollar question becomes, how do we get you out of the neighborhood and into that mental race car?
The most immediate, impactful physical hack recommended in the text is using a visual pacer. Essentially, the author is giving you permission to give your reading the finger.
Huh. I love that phrasing, permission granted to give your reading the finger. But it's true. When we were kids, teachers would literally slap our hands or tell us, don't point at the words, you'll read slower.
They had it completely backward.
Completely backward.
The science of human vision proves it. Children naturally point at words because it works. The human eye is biologically wired to track motion. It is an evolutionary survival mechanism. Our ancestors needed to track a moving animal in the brush.
So it's built in.
Try this right now. If you hold your finger completely still in front of your face and try to move your eyes smoothly from left to right across the room without looking at anything specific, your eyes won't glide. They will jerk and jump.
But if you use a guide...
But if you move your finger smoothly from left to right and follow it with your eyes, the eye movement, what optometrists call smooth pursuit, is perfectly fluid. By using your finger, a pen, or even a computer mouse as a visual pacer sweeping under the text, you are giving your eyes a physical guide to lock onto.
It eliminates regression almost entirely because your eye is pulled forward by the motion.
This simple mechanical act can instantly increase your reading speed by 25 to 100% without any drop in comprehension.
That is massive. You are just upgrading the hardware tracking of your eyes. And once you get comfortable with the visual pacer, if you really want to blow the doors off your reading speed, you have to try what the text calls the 4-minute overload workout.
This is essentially high-intensity interval training, but for your eyeballs and your neurological processing.
How does it work?
It's a highly effective drill based on neuroplasticity. You take a book you are currently reading, use a timer, and alongside your visual pacer, you push your eyes to track across the text 2 to 3 times faster than what feels remotely comfortable.
Just flying through it.
You maintain this hyper-elevated sprint for 4 straight minutes. Now, the crucial thing to understand here is that during this specific 4-minute sprint, you are not worried about perfect comprehension. You will likely feel like you are just skimming a blur of words.
So you aren't actually trying to read it.
Comprehension isn't the goal of the drill. The goal is forcing your visual tracking system and your brain to process the symbols at a highly elevated, uncomfortable rate. You are stretching the capacity of the system.
And the magic of this workout reveals itself the moment the timer goes off. It induces what we can call the highway off-ramp effect.
Oh, I know this feeling.
We've all experienced this. You're driving on the interstate at 75 or 80 miles per hour for an hour. Your brain adapts to the speed. The blur of the trees feels normal. Then you take the exit ramp and drop down to 40 miles per hour on a local road. How does it feel?
It feels like you are crawling.
You feel like you could open the door, step out, and walk faster than the car is moving. Why? Because your brain's neurological baseline for speed was temporarily elevated.
When you finish that 4-minute reading sprint and intentionally drop back down to a normal, comfortable reading speed to actually comprehend the text, you'll suddenly realize your new normal is significantly faster than your old baseline. What used to feel fast now feels slow.
You have permanently elevated your capacity. And the real-world implications of this are staggering. The source text highlights some incredible transformations from people who implemented these exact, simple mechanics.
Like the story of Sarah.
Yes, Sarah. She was a professional who jumped from an average reading speed of 253 words per minute, which is standard, to a staggering 838 words per minute.
And her comprehension actually improved. She now starts every single day with a massive psychological win simply by tearing through an entire book before breakfast.
That's incredible. Then there is the story of Lou, the engineering student. Lou excelled at advanced mathematics, but was entirely convinced he was bad at English and deeply struggled through every assigned text. It took him hours to read a chapter.
Once he learned these mechanics, the visual pacer, reducing subvocalization, his entire academic trajectory shifted.
It wasn't an intelligence issue at all. He wasn't bad at English. It was just a mechanical bottleneck in how he absorbed data.
Think about the compound interest of that skill. Imagine what you could achieve in your career or your personal growth if you could process information 3 times faster. The books you'd finally conquer, the new skills you'd acquire, the sheer time you would save. It literally unlimits your potential.
But acquiring the information quickly and remembering it perfectly is still only part of the equation. Once we read it, once we store it in the memory muscle, we have to know what to do with it. We have to process it.
Which brings us to the ultimate upgrade. Section 3. Upgrading your operating system thinking.
This is covered in Chapter 15, and it addresses what I believe is a critical systemic gap in our modern education system. Throughout our schooling, we are extensively taught what to think. We are handed facts, dates, formulas, and historical narratives to memorize.
But we are very rarely, if ever, taught the actual mechanics of how to think critically.
Albert Einstein perfectly diagnosed this problem when he said, "We can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them." Essentially, we all skipped thinking class in school, and it's time to finally enroll.
Because right now, most of us operate in a single default cognitive mode. We look at a business challenge, a relationship problem, or a creative block the exact same way we look at every problem.
Filtered through our own narrow biases and current emotional state.
To break out of that singular, rigid mode, the source text introduces a profoundly effective framework created by the physician and psychologist, Dr. Edward de Bono. It's called the 6 Thinking Hats.
The 6 thinking hats. I love this visual.
You can think of this as a rapid-fire, intentional wardrobe change for your brain. It forces you to consciously adopt distinctly different perspectives when evaluating a problem. Most people try to do everything at once. They try to be logical, emotional, creative, and critical all in the same breath.
Which just leads to a messy, paralyzed jumble of thoughts.
Exactly. The 6 Hats method forces you to compartmentalize and sequence your thinking.
Let's walk through this wardrobe because it's incredibly practical. Let's use a real-world scenario. Let's say you are trying to decide whether to quit your stable corporate job and launch your own startup. A massive, stressful decision.
Okay, so first, you intentionally put on the white hat. Think of a scientist's crisp white lab coat. When you are wearing the white hat, you are strictly in information gathering mode.
Just the facts.
You are only allowed to look at objective facts and data. No opinions, no fears, no gut feelings allowed. Just the raw data. What do we know? How much savings do I have? What is the market size for my product? What are the statistical failure rates of startups in this sector?
You establish the baseline reality. Once you have the raw data laid out, you consciously take off the white hat and put on the yellow hat. Imagine the bright, shining sun. This is the hat of pure, unadulterated optimism.
Now, your only job is to actively search for the positives, the intrinsic value, and the absolute best-case scenario.
Even if the white hat data looked grim, the yellow hat forces you to ask, what is the hidden opportunity here? If this startup succeeds wildly, how will it change my life? What unique skills will I gain, even if it struggles? It forces your brain out of its natural negativity bias.
Okay, so you've dreamed big. Now, you switch to the black hat. Think of a stern judge's black robe. This is the skeptic, the critical thinker. Your job now is to ruthlessly spot the pitfalls, the risks, and the fatal flaws in the startup plan.
You actively look for what could go wrong.
What if my co-founder quits? What if the supply chain breaks down? What if I run out of capital in 6 months? And what's brilliant about this sequence is that because you already wore the yellow hat and saw the potential upside, the black hat doesn't turn you into a permanent, paralyzed pessimist.
It just ensures you are being analytical, safe, and calculating your risks objectively. It turns fear into a diagnostic tool rather than a stopping block.
Precisely. Next, you transition to the red hat. Visualize a beating red heart. This hat represents pure emotion, intuition, and visceral gut feelings.
This is vital because humans are not purely logical machines. Under the red hat, you do not need to justify your feelings with facts or spreadsheets. If the idea of leaving your corporate job makes you physically nauseous with anxiety, or if you just have a bad intuitive feeling about your potential business partner, you voice it here.
It validates that human emotion is real data and must be factored into the final decision.
Then we get to the really fun one, the green hat. Think of green grass, new growth, a fresh spring day. This is the hat of pure, unbounded creativity.
When the green hat is on, there are no bad ideas and no judgment. You are brainstorming wild, out-of-the-box alternatives.
You are asking, how can we look at this completely differently? Do I have to quit my job entirely? Or could I negotiate working 4 days a week to test the startup on Fridays? Could I partner with an existing company instead of starting from scratch? You are generating new pathways.
And finally, to bring order to the process, you don the blue hat. Think of the blue sky that arches over everything else, encompassing the whole environment. This is the management hat, the executive function.
The blue hat looks at the big picture, manages the agenda, and ensures that all the diverse insights gathered from the data, the optimism, the skepticism, the emotion, and the creativity are synthesized into a coherent, actionable strategy.
By actively and sequentially switching these hats, you guarantee a holistic 360-degree view of any problem, preventing you from getting trapped in your own default blind spots.
It's like having a boardroom full of incredibly diverse, specialized experts, but they all live inside your own head. You can run any problem through that boardroom.
And speaking of diverse experts, while we are talking about upgrading how we think, we also need to shatter the archaic idea of the standard IQ test.
Oh, this is so important.
For a century, we've operated under this binary idea that you are either smart or dumb based on a single score on a standardized test. But Dr. Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, which the book heavily references, proves that human cognition is vastly more complex than that.
As the old saying goes, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing it is stupid.
Gardner's research is incredibly liberating for anyone who struggled in a traditional academic environment. Traditional schooling heavily, almost exclusively, prioritizes linguistic intelligence reading and writing and logical mathematical intelligence.
Equations and structured problem solving. If you excel in those two narrow areas, society deems you smart.
But Gardner identified that human intelligence manifests in at least 8 distinct forms. For instance, consider spatial intelligence. This is the ability to think in 3 dimensions and visualize the world accurately.
Like airline pilots, they possess incredibly high spatial intelligence to navigate complex instruments and physical space.
Or grandmaster chess players who use it to visualize the board multiple moves ahead without touching a piece. The artist Claude Monet used it to intuitively understand the geometry of space and the play of light on a canvas.
Exactly. And there are so many others. You might have incredible bodily kinesthetic intelligence. Professional athletes, surgeons, and dancers use this. Their brain's ability to coordinate and control their physical body is a profound form of genius.
Or you might have high musical intelligence, understanding rhythm and pitch intuitively.
Or interpersonal intelligence, the deep empathy and ability to read, motivate, and lead other people, which is often the defining trait of great CEOs.
True intellectual power doesn't come from forcing yourself to be mathematically gifted if you aren't. It comes from identifying where your natural dominance lies. Are you more of an audio, visual, or kinesthetic learner? Once you know that, you can intentionally overlap those styles to hyper-accelerate your learning. If you are a strong visual learner, reading a physical book is great, but if you combine it with listening to the audiobook at the same time, you are activating multiple intelligences.
Essentially lighting up different sectors of the neural matrix simultaneously.
Understanding your own unique intelligence profile is, in itself, a powerful mental model. And the book emphasizes that mental models are the ultimate cognitive upgrades.
Think of mental models as conceptual frameworks or rules of thumb that help you understand the world. They are cognitive shortcuts that save your brain valuable energy when making complex decisions in a chaotic environment.
The text provides a toolkit of high-velocity mental models. Let's examine a few of the most practical ones, starting with the 40-70 rule, which was famously utilized by former U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell.
The 40-70 rule is an absolute lifesaver for anyone who struggles with overthinking, perfectionism, or decision paralysis. The rule provides a mathematical framework for action. It states, never make a major decision with less than 40% of the available information.
If you only have 20% or 30% of the facts, you aren't making an informed executive choice. You are just blindly guessing, and the risk of catastrophic failure is too high. You must gather data until you hit that 40% threshold.
But, and this is the crucial paradigm-shifting part of the model, never wait until you have more than 70% of the information to make the call.
That upper limit is profound, and it is where most intelligent people fail. Why cap your information gathering at 70%? Because the pursuit of perfect information is an illusion.
If you are waiting until you have 80%, 90%, or 100% certainty before you launch the product, make the investment, or change careers, you are no longer gathering information. You are stalling.
You are actively procrastinating disguised as research because you are afraid of the outcome. In a fast-paced, dynamic world, the window of opportunity will close while you are obsessively searching for that final 30% of data to guarantee safety.
The 40-70 model forces you to accept that ambiguity is part of leadership. You must gather enough data to be informed and then trust your ability to navigate the unknown.
I love that. Gather to 70%, then pull the trigger and adjust on the fly. Another brilliant mental model discussed is the not-to-do list.
We all have massive sprawling to-do lists that make us feel overwhelmed the moment we wake up. The not-to-do list is the anti-menu. It is a tool for subtraction rather than addition.
It acts as a preemptive protective shield for your focus. Cognitive load theory suggests we only have so much willpower and decision-making capacity in a given day. Before you start your deep work, you write down specifically what you must actively avoid doing.
I will not open my email inbox before 10 a.m.
I will not bring my phone into the room while reading this chapter.
I will not engage in office gossip today. By explicitly identifying your most likely distractions and defining them as enemies of your productivity beforehand, you strip them of their subconscious power to derail you.
Yes, write down the enemies so you can see them coming. And the final mental model I want to highlight from this section is study your errors. It sounds simple, but it requires a massive ego check.
It means turning every past mistake, every embarrassing failure, into an immediate forensic learning opportunity. When a project crashes and burns, our instinct is to hide from it, bury the data, and move on, because it hurts our pride.
But the limitless mindset dictates that you dissect the failure. Why did it fail? Was my white hat data flawed? Did I let my red hat emotion override the black hat risks?
When you objectively study the error without self-flagellation, the failure ceases to be a defining character flaw. It simply becomes the tuition you pay for future success.
Every single one of these methods we've explored today, the sensory memory associations, the visual pacers bypassing the phonological loop for speed reading, the six thinking hats breaking cognitive rigidity, the mental models cutting through decision paralysis, they are all systematically designed to strip away the artificial limits you've placed on your cognitive machinery.
Which brings us, finally, to the integration phase, the conclusion of our journey, the 10-day quick start and the limitless you.
We have officially reached the climax of our four-part journey, Section 4.
If you think about the classic narrative of the hero's journey in mythology, you've lived it through these deep dives. You started in the ordinary world, perhaps feeling overwhelmed or doubting your memory. You received the call to adventure. You faced the trials of unlearning your deeply rooted, limiting beliefs about your intelligence. And now, you are experiencing the hero's return.
You were walking back into your daily life, your career, your relationships, but you were not the same person. You were armed with the ultimate superhero toolkit.
But a toolkit is completely useless if it just sits in a pristine box on a shelf.
Execution is everything. The source material anticipates this and provides a rapid-fire, highly practical action plan to integrate these methods into your daily routine immediately so they become permanent neurological habits. It's outlined as the 10-day integration sprint. Let's hit some of the most critical milestones in this sprint, starting right at the beginning. Day 1 is all about putting the FASTER acronym into action. This is the master framework for learning any new subject.
Let's really break FASTER down because if you memorize this, you can learn anything. FASTER. The F stands for forget.
Which sounds weird for a memory deep dive. But it means intentionally forgetting what you think you already know about a subject so you can approach it with a beginner's mind, free of bias. And it means forgetting your situational distractions, putting the phone in another room.
The A is for act. Learning is not a passive spectator sport. It is an active creation, not a passive consumption. You have to take notes, ask questions, and engage.
What about the S? The S is absolutely vital. It stands for state. This refers to managing your emotional and physical state of being. All learning is state-dependent. If you try to learn a complex topic while you are slumped over, exhausted, and feeling anxious, your brain associates that negative physiological state with the information, making it much harder to recall.
You must actively manage your posture, your breathing, and your emotional enthusiasm before you sit down to learn.
The T stands for teach. When you approach a book or a lesson with the explicit intention that you're going to have to explain this material to someone else tomorrow, a technique often associated with the physicist Richard Feynman, your brain inherently organizes and retains the information with far greater clarity and retention. You learn it twice as fast when you plan to teach it.
I use the Feynman technique all the time. If I can't explain it to my 10-year-old nephew, I don't really understand it myself. Then we have E, which stands for enter. This is pure logistics. Enter it into your calendar. We say we want to read more or learn a language, but if it is not physically scheduled in your calendar as a non-negotiable appointment with yourself, it is just a wish. It doesn't exist.
And finally, the R is for review. This ties back to what we discussed earlier, using spaced repetition to actively review the material over a few days, so it transfers from short-term working memory into the deeply myelinated pathways of long-term storage.
That entire framework is just day one of the integration sprint. Moving to day two, the focus shifts inward to your internal dialogue. The directive is to kill your ANTs.
ANTs is an acronym used in cognitive behavioral therapy that stands for automatic negative thoughts. This is the practical daily integration of the mindset work we did in the first part of the series.
You have to become the observer of your own thoughts and actively talk back to the voice that habitually says, I always screw up these presentations, or I'm just a slow learner. You have to eradicate the ANTs before they build a permanent colony in your mind and dictate your reality.
You literally have to grab a can of mental bug spray and squash those thoughts the second they appear. Replace I have a bad memory with I have an untrained memory and I am training it today.
And skipping ahead to the culmination of the sprint on day 10, the instruction is simple but profound. Embrace reading. This is presented as the keystone habit of the limitless mind.
The goal isn't to read a book a day immediately. The goal is to schedule just 10 minutes a day to read using your new visual pacer.
Okay.
10 minutes. Every single person listening to this has 10 minutes they currently waste scrolling social media. The power of that small, consistent daily action compounds massively over months and years.
When you apply this 10-day sprint, you are not just acquiring new party tricks for your memory. You are actively forging what the author calls the limitless identity. In psychology, identity is understood to be the most powerful driver of human behavior. Your actions will almost always align with who you believe yourself to be.
If your internal identity is that you are a forgetful, disorganized person, you will unconsciously sabotage yourself to act forgetfully. But through these methods, you are systematically destroying that old identity. You are no longer that person.
Listen to me right now. Paint this vivid, undeniable picture in your mind of who you are becoming through this process. You are no longer the person who leaves the house without their phone and descends into a full-blown panic because you don't know any phone numbers or directions.
You are no longer the person who walks into a high-stakes networking party and cowers in the corner because you are terrified you'll forget an important client's name.
You are no longer the person who stares at a massive, daunting stack of industry reports on your desk and feels completely overwhelmed, defeated, and behind the curve. That is the old you, the legacy operating system.
The limitless you knows with absolute certainty that you can learn anything faster. The limitless you knows the mechanics of the brain. You know that if you can learn it, you can do it. You have the upgraded operating system. You have the high-performance software. You just have to sit down and run the program.
The transformation is truly profound because it shifts you from being a passive victim of your environmental circumstances and genetic assumptions to being an active, deliberate architect of your own cognitive reality. You understand the mechanics of your own mind, which is the ultimate form of leverage.
Okay, let's bring it all home. We have covered an immense, almost overwhelming amount of ground over these 4 deep dives.
From the foundational mindset of believing you are capable of unlimiting yourself, to the neurological motivation of finding your energy and purpose, to the highly tactical methods of memory association, speed reading mechanics, and diverse mental models we just unpacked today.
It all comes together to remind us of one of my absolute favorite, most resonant quotes from the end of the source material. The life you live are the lessons you teach.
It's a beautiful summation. Your actions, your continuous pursuit of growth, and your absolute refusal to be limited by outdated beliefs are the ultimate unspoken example to everyone around you. Your colleagues, your friends, your children.
But before we officially sign off and conclude this mini-series, we want to leave you with one final lingering question to mull over, a provocative thought to carry with you as you step back into the world.
Think deeply about everything we've discussed today. If your memory is truly a biological muscle that must be consistently worked and stressed to grow stronger, and if your ability to think critically is determined by the diverse mental models and hats you actively choose to wear and practice.
What happens to our world and to us as a species if we continue to build artificial intelligence that gets exponentially faster and smarter every single day, while we simultaneously, comfortably allow our own biological intelligence to atrophy in a digital sling?
It is arguably the defining philosophical and cognitive challenge of our current era. The technology itself is not the enemy. AI and digital tools are miraculous innovations. But the vital question you must ask yourself every day is this. Are you using this technology as a lever to expand your mind and reach new heights? Or are you passively using it as a crutch that is slowly, quietly putting your brain to sleep?
Do not let your brain go to sleep.
Boom. That is the question of the decade.
Yeah.
Take your new Limitless toolkit out into the real world. Run your finger under the text. Put on your 6 thinking hats when you face a crisis. Build those absurd sensory memory bridges. Be limitless. Thank you so much for joining us on this massive 4-part journey. We'll see you on the next deep dive.